an old man, childless, and once the disappointment of his father, becomes a master swordsman. He is summoned to the imperial order by a former student who he thinks is stunningly beautiful. Now, he must leave the countryside and travel to the capital with this woman to become a master in the city. A middle-aged man practices his skills with a wooden sword. In front of him, his father laments, seeing children running through the yard, that he should have had grandchildren by now. The younger man complains that he should be the center of attention at this moment, and the elder states that the boy's technique is great, having taken him on as a master 20 years ago. Returning to his grievance, he comments that the younger man has no consideration for family. Soon, the man training is greeted by his enthusiastic students, and he states that taking care of the dojo and finding more female students is a significant act of consideration. Besides, he has no idea how he could have children when he hasn't even married yet. The father suggests that perhaps one of his female students might be suitable, but the sensei makes it clear that the dojo is no place for romance. By the way, this is a simple dojo that has taught the art of the sword for generations. The teacher was born there and, as far as he can remember, has always played with wooden swords. Little changes in this place, and the man does what he can to keep everything running. As a boy, his dream was to be a swordsman. He had above-average ability and good speed for his age, but none of it was enough. In any case, the man does not complain, feeling that he is exactly where he should be. He may not be the best, but he has a knack for teaching. Later, as class ends, the master reflects that many of his students have pursued very successful careers, which is a great source of pride. When he goes home to grab something to eat, his father is still harping on about becoming a grandfather. The old man asks if Fren, his wife, wouldn't love it if Beryl found a wife to give them a little grandchild. But the woman thinks everything should happen in its own time, and it's not right to rush things, although she's sure that one day their son will have children for the grandparents to dote on. With that, Beryl realizes that his mother is neither siding with his father nor with him. Suddenly, someone knocks at the door. Beryl answers and sees a young woman in armor, mentioning it's been a long time since she last saw her master. Her name is Alucia Citrus. The teacher invites his former student in and serves her tea. His father comments that the girl always sends letters, so he knows she's been promoted to commander of the Royal Order of Knights, meaning Beryl did a great job. By the way, the sensei asks what the young lady is doing there, and she explains that she's also teaching fencing. Therefore, she came to inform him that she recommended Beryl as a special instructor for the order, and the appointment was approved. The sensei thinks it's some kind of prank, but the knight presents the official document for him to sign. Beryl's father warns in advance that his son will die if he doesn't sign that thing, and Alucia corrects that it won't go that far. But really, the trainer will face serious consequences. Anyway, she came by carriage to take Beryl to spend the night in the capital, and tomorrow they can talk more calmly. The man is confused by all this happening so fast, but since the dojo isn't open tomorrow, the father also pushes for his son to go, especially because he might get lucky and take this beautiful young woman as his wife. Beryl gets annoyed and tells his father to stop joking, as there's a significant age difference between the two, but Alucia herself acts as if she wishes the teacher had taken it seriously. In the end, the instructor gets into the carriage and heads to the capital. He notices that Alucia has the same sword he gave her when she graduated from the dojo, something he does with all the students who finish the course. Despite being happy for the consideration, he wonders if that old weapon is suitable for a commander of the order, but Alucia insists on keeping her present close. Hearing this, Beryl finds it amusing that she still seems to maintain that childlike idea that the teacher is always better than the student, which makes no sense, especially since he's too old now to be the important instructor she needs. Despite this, the commander is excited about the possibility of a countryside swordmaster finally working in the capital, and is sure her former teacher will do a great job. By the way, she herself thinks she needs to improve to deserve the sensei's consideration. But, taking advantage that he didn't hear this last part, she preferred to leave it at that. Soon, the two arrive in the capital of Baltrain, and Beryl is happy to be back after so many years. After being dropped off at the inn where he must spend the night, he observes the various shops and people and thinks he's too old for this. The next day, Alucia explains to her men that she summoned Beryl Gardinant to be the special instructor of the Order of Freedom and states that Beryl is so strong that not even she can match him. With that, she calls the professor to address all those soldiers, which makes him break out in a cold sweat. After gathering some courage, he starts his speech, hoping to be useful to everyone there, and that the partnership between them will be a success. At the end of his speech, one soldier asks another if they should be concerned, and another seems angry. When the men are dismissed, the commander praises the new instructor's speech and explains that he must train the knights 3 or 4 times a month, which should not interfere with his work at the dojo. Speaking of which, a knight named Kirani arrives running to meet her former teacher and recalls a scolding from the commander. Beryl is impressed to see that the girl has become a true knight, but she explains that she still has a long way to go. The professor remembers that Kirani trained for 2 years at the dojo and worked hard to get where she is, and she's happy to have the opportunity to train with her master again. When he returns home at night, Beryl feels happy to have 2 former students in the order. Upon entering the door, he is surprised to see Randrid there inside, another former student who came with his wife and child. Despite the joyful moment of reconnecting with another old apprentice, Beryl's father says no one needs the son there, and he should stay in Baltrain to dedicate himself to the new job and only come back when he has found a wife. Despite his reservations, Beryl sits down at the table to talk with Randrid and learns that the young man is giving up his adventurous life to move to the village now that he has become a father. The professor thinks it's a significant life change for someone of the platinum class, and Randrid feels somewhat guilty since it was the sensei's training that got him there. On the other hand, Beryl recalls that he trained the boy for 10 years, but it was Randrid's own effort that shaped him as an individual. After all, adventurers may earn well, but it's a risky profession. Beryl's father mentions that this must be a stroke of luck, as Randrid is familiar with the dojo's training style and could take on the former teacher's responsibilities if he assumes the role of master. With that, Randrid Paddlerock commits to serving as needed, and Beryl is left trying to understand how all this happened so quickly. Certainly, his old man convinced the boy to take over the dojo while he was away. To make matters worse, the elder invites the family to spend the night there, and Beryl mutters that it's his house. When dawn breaks again, the professor shares the story with Alusha, who pretends she didn't like what happened, since she actually wanted to keep the sensei close to her. Beryl apologizes for having brought the commander to find a place for him, since the inn where he stayed is too expensive for him to afford. Taking advantage of her unrestricted access to the area, Alusha shoots her shot by inviting the man to stay at her place, but watches the ball go out as soon as the guy refuses the offer, as if it were something from another world, or even a weird joke from young people. Alusha doesn't give up and invites the master to lunch, hoping for at least a disguised meeting, but suddenly, a woman on the street comments that the order's commander is walking around with a man who looks like a coward. Beryl overhears this and hides his face in embarrassment, imagining it's not good for Alusha's image to be seen with an old man like him. Immediately, Alusha has Lysandra shut down the idle chatter, and they continue walking, but the meddler insists and questions how the commander dares to call just any ordinary guy master. Beryl notices that the woman carries a black class adventurer's plaque, something he has never seen before, until Lysandra finally realizes she's in front of Master Beryl. In turn, the man doesn't recognize the girl, which she expected, since she hasn't seen him in 20 years. Nevertheless, he tries to rekindle the memory of the old teacher by introducing herself as Shurna Lysandra, who was taken in by him when she was very young and received sword lessons. At that moment, Beryl remembers the young Shurna from long ago when he found her lost by the riverbank and took her into his home, besides offering training. After so much time, Shurna reveals that she would love to share the success she's had in life with the professor, but never had the chance. By the way, she questions what Master Beryl is doing walking with Citrus. Then the commander herself flares up to explain that the sensei is now a special instructor of the Order of Freedom, and the two are looking for a place in Baltrain for him to live, not one to back down from a fight. Shurna provokes by responding that it makes sense for the guy to be an instructor, but thinks she could help with lodging much more than the commander, having once been an adventurer's broker. As evening approaches, the two finally find a place for the professor, who thanks both for their help, although he wishes they would respect each other a bit more. Ignoring his words, they walk out the door after saying goodbye. Then Beryl watches the two walking down the street from the window, reflecting that he's no longer of the age to enjoy a move to the big city life, but it's good to have former students looking after him. The following morning, a skilled knight displays all his power by simply breaking his opponent's wooden sword and winning the fight. After the duel, Alucia Citrus announces that Master Gardenet will be responsible for the lessons from then on. Rejecting the new teacher, the powerful knight argues that one needs a certain level of strength to become an instructor of the Order of Freedom, so he needs to prove his capability. Beryl asks who this arrogant man is, and Citrus explains that it's Henblitz Drought, the vice commander of the order. With that, the vice challenges the sensei to a duel, and the superior accepts as a way for the master to show his worth. Thus, even against his will, Beryl steps into the middle of the training room for the confrontation. Around, other knights doubt that this rustic professor can teach them anything, which even Beryl himself doesn't dispute. Drought states that it's very kind of the commander to want to boost the old master's morale, but even kindness can lead to mistakes. Again, even Beryl agrees with this, but promises to do his best not to lose too badly, as it would look really bad for Alucia if he got a brutal beating from this unbearable brat. Finally, the duel begins, and Drought takes the initiative by charging at his opponent and delivering several blows. Blocking each one, the sensei recognizes that it would be disastrous if he got hit by one of those, so he maneuvers his sword to transform the next block into a counterattack and strikes his rival's chin with the pommel of the weapon. Having done this, he asks if the student is all right, which infuriates Drought even more. After this move, the two return to their initial positions, and Beryl regrets having struck the blow, since his initial intention was to have stopped sooner. In his mind, this is an unforgivable attitude for an instructor. Before the second round, Drought already warns that he won't fall for the next cheap trick, so he charges again with even more force. Defending properly, Beryl knows that the boy is stronger and faster than him, but his movements are very linear, meaning easy to predict. Counting on this, the sensei anticipates the next strike and pushes the opponent away. Drought gets even angrier and prepares his famous move in the order for destroying the opponent's sword. However, after actually attacking, he realizes that Beryl had disappeared from his sight, and, before he knew it, the instructor was behind him with the sword at his back. After the crushing defeat, the student makes a startled face in the face of such incredible skill, but soon yields to the power of the sensei and acts as if he were his #1 fan, shaking the man while begging to learn that amazing technique. Later on, it's actually Drought who organizes the outing and proposes a toast in honor of the teacher's nomination at a tavern. Moreover, he apologizes for his earlier rudeness, but Beryl understands being questioned since he was a stranger who suddenly appeared to train the battalion. After a few drinks, Alucia bluntly tells the deputy commander that she warned him. Beryl Gardenante is formidable and should be respected. Kearney comments that the officer really knows how to drink, just like the deputy, but she herself only drinks occasionally and can't keep up with the frenetic pace of these two. Henblitz again emphasizes how impressed he was with the teacher's technique, and Beryl replies that Drought's technique matched his style, but the young man doesn't believe it was just that, because the way the sensei used the last move to his advantage was otherworldly, and the knight would love to know the secret to doing that. Beryl then shares that he simply matched his rotation with that of his opponent. Kearney remarks that it sounds easy when put that way, and Alucia agrees it is, but only for the master. Beryl adds that anticipating the next move is also important, and that if Drought had been less rigid, he certainly wouldn't have won. Hearing this great tip, Henblitz states he is eager to work with the new master. Meanwhile, in the village at night, Beryl's father thanks Randrid for his help. The young man responds that nothing makes him happier than helping Master Beryl conquer the world, and the elder stresses that his son deserves better than this village, and Randrid adds that he has seen many things as an adventurer, but has never met a swordsman better than Gardenet. On this, the instructor's father agrees and hopes that his son will reach even greater heights. A week later, Master Gardenet was leading another training day. Early in an exercise, he humbly interrupted a pair practicing to advise one of them to adjust their distance from the opponent. When the soldier didn't quite understand, the instructor stepped in to demonstrate. If the opponent focuses on your sword, they won't notice you changing the distance. Although it might seem trivial, it's worth remembering that even half a step could determine whether you survive a real conflict. After he finished teaching, Beryl noticed that everyone was paying attention, as if he had just reinvented the wheel, despite it being such a basic concept. After the training, Henblitz followed the tutor and handed him a towel to wipe the sweat from his face. As he did so, Beryl reflected that their eagerness to listen might stem from the recent duel with that soldier, since Drought is highly regarded among his peers. Kiruni arrived shortly after and asked if the sensei was free that afternoon to show him around the capital, given that he was from the countryside and might be lost in the big city. Since the girl mentioned it, Beryl thought it a good idea to take a tour and get to know the area, and the girl was excited to guide the teacher. At that moment, he reflected that he was doing well so far as an instructor, at least for now. Meanwhile, at a meeting with the High Command, the battalion commander was informed that the Order of Freedom's plans for the period had been approved, and she was to submit her budget to accounting. Changing the subject, they inquired whether the instructor was meeting expectations, and Alusha Citrus confessed that he had even exceeded them. After the meeting, the officer pondered that one could indeed become a commander if they aspired to master the sword, as the profession consumed much of one's time. Anyway, she couldn't leave her master where he was. This reminded Alusha of when she first met Beryl Gardnet. Her family had moved to a neighboring town where Beryl's dojo was located, after hearing glowing recommendations about the local instructor. Her parents thought it was a good time for their daughter to learn self-defense, especially since the order didn't closely monitor the rural areas, so knowing how to defend oneself was always a great option. At her mother's request, young Alusha greeted the new sensei, who responded with such kindness that it left a lasting impression on the little girl. Soon after, the child began her training with basic moves, and Beryl explained each detail with great patience and care. He trained the girl's movements to be more efficient, in a rigorous routine that was all new to Alusha. For a year and a half, her training focused on these fundamentals and kata practice. Young Citrus never tired of this routine and felt increasingly strong. Gradually, the sword became comfortable in her hands, but best of all was the sensei praising even her small achievements, which made the student very happy. One day, during an exercise in the dojo, Alusha wondered why Randrid was taking so long. After interrupting the training with this student, Beryl announced it was time to practice attack moves, and the girl was excited by the opportunity. However, as she faced the teacher in a battle stance, the apprentice simply felt there was no opening to strike. She pondered for a while, but decided to try her luck with a strike. Effortlessly, Beryl dodged the girl's sword and subdued her within the first minute of the fight. Despite this, the sensei praised her instinct, believing she had acted at the right moment rather than attacking randomly. Today, Alusha understands what he meant, but at the time, she thought all fencing instructors knew how to do what her teacher did. On another day, Beryl took his students to a friendly competition at another dojo, where they would duel with no contact and no strikes above the neck. Randrid started a fight against the local student and won with the first counterattack after the opponent struck recklessly. The next representative from Beryl's dojo was Alusha Citrus, who, as soon as she took her battle stance, noticed her opponent had more gaps to attack than the defense of a poorly performing sports team. The rival tried to hit the girl any way he could, and she dodged effortlessly. The boy managed to unbalance her with one move, but she easily defeated him on her first attack. After this exercise, on the way back, Beryl emphasized the importance of practicing against different styles, so Alusha asked if their dojo was as strong as it seemed because they had won their duels hands down, and Beryl had even won the competition against their master. Nevertheless, the sensei replied that it was a matter of alignment between styles, and the student should think about what she learned, not who won or lost. Hearing this lesson, Alusha remembered that she had forgotten something at the dojo and ran back to retrieve it. Upon arriving, she was surprised by a group of local students who surrounded the girl with unfriendly faces, deliberately holding the item she had lost. When she tried to take it from the boy, he threw her hair accessory to the ground and told her to pick it up, claiming that their fight was just a silly simulation and didn't mean she had won or anything. After all, none of them would ever lose to a mere country girl. With that, their leader tried to strike Alusha, but Beryl was back in time to block the blow, which was no soft pat on the back by the look on the sensei's face. By the way, Beryl confessed that he didn't like the way these kids used fencing. When he was attacked by the boy, he took the sword from his hand and pushed back his friends with a few non-harming strikes. The most heated one didn't give up and grabbed a sword from a companion to resume the fight, but their master arrived to scold the kids, making it clear that they could all gang up against this guy, but they would never be able to touch him, and that Gardner's students were simply better. End of story. Beryl asked the dojo master to calm down. After all, his apprentices were just going through a tough age. Then the man bowed before him and took responsibility for the poor behavior of the boys. In turn, Beryl felt embarrassed and thought this was an overreaction. On his way home, he mentioned having a bad feeling when Alusha returned to that place, and fortunately, he had decided to accompany her. Nevertheless, the student felt guilty for her teacher getting hurt, so he took responsibility for letting her go back alone. Instead of scolding her, he apologized for being careless and putting her in danger. Alusha began to cry, so Beryl invited her to grab some food to ease the situation. The child might not have said it at the time, but the real reason she cried that day wasn't out of fear or sadness. It was because she realized that when emotions take over, tears are hard to hold back. Some time later, teacher and student faced each other in another simulated duel. Beryl Gardner took a deep breath and initiated the fight, but it was Alusha who took the final step, managing for the first time to subdue her master by maneuvering around his sword and rendering him. It was on that day the sensei handed over her personal sword, feeling she was ready, although she thought otherwise. However, Beryl was convinced he had nothing left to teach her. Alusha thought her master was so humble that he truly believed what he said, but she was sure she was still far from being like him. Regardless, the girl accepted his decision and took her sword. Holding that real weapon, the apprentice simply didn't want to leave the dojo forever, but also didn't want to trouble the sensei with her internal conflict. After leaving her nest and spreading her wings, Citrus decided to prove that her master's skills were unmatched. When she tested to join the order, the vague feeling she had became a certainty. Alusha easily passed her trials, and neither the other candidates nor the order's examining board matched her master's speed, and the young swordswoman joined the institution with top marks, further solidifying her belief. The quality of vision and reaction speed she had learned were unparalleled within the academy, and this mastery convinced her that it would be a waste to leave the man who taught her everything behind in the countryside, away from a responsibility that could elevate him to a level worthy of his talent. Alusha quickly rose to the rank of commander and achieved much, and when she gained the authority to hire an instructor, it had been years since she had left the dojo. But her master remained the same as ever, or rather, he had even improved, aging like fine wine. Some might think the woman is exaggerating, but she wanted to prove that her teacher deserved recognition. Thus, she took it upon herself to undertake this mission. Back in the present, Alusha returns to her men, then asks Henblitz how today's training went. He reports that Beryl never ceases to amaze the guys with his technique, but that the teacher had gone out to explore the capital with Kirani. Alusha feels a pang of jealousy, as she had intended to do the same for a real date. But since her subordinate didn't hear what she said, the commander decides to let it go. Speaking of those two, Beryl is impressed by the size of the city's market, as it is much different from the village he comes from. Kirani suggests that he should visit the West District, but the master thought the North District had more tourist spots like the palace and the church. However, the girl explains that only country folk like those things, so Beryl realizes that he really is just a country bumpkin lost in the big city. Suddenly, the two are approached by another former student of the professor in the market. Kirani instantly recognizes Feis and greets her friend enthusiastically. Honestly, Beryl doesn't remember who she is, so the girl pretends she's going to cry with the harsh reality, and shows her farewell sword to jog his memory. Well, this proves that this person completed training at his dojo, so Beryl racks his brain and finally remembers he's facing Faisal, noting that he didn't recognize her because she has changed so much. Feis shares that she has grown a lot in the 5 years since leaving the dojo, and the sensei questions whether she really trained in the last 2 years with Kirani. Kirani joyfully shares that her friend is now the star of the magic corps, which confuses the former teacher, since he teaches swordsmanship. Speaking of which, Feis mentions she came to buy some magical accessories like this fire ring. Kirani comments that even a beginner can cast spells with it, as long as they have the money to pay, of course. However, Feis lights a big flame on one finger and makes it clear she doesn't rely on that to do what she does best. Beryl is surprised and comments that the girl really turned into a witch, and she proudly replies that she dedicated a lot to achieve this. Few people become witches, meaning it's indeed a great challenge. The professor reflects that it's a pity his former student abandoned swordsmanship, but he's proud she reached where she did. Suddenly, an ugly creature steals a bag from an old lady in the market and dashes away. Beryl and Kearney rush to stop the thief, but Faisal asks to handle the situation and casts a spell from her sword that ties the thief's legs like a rope, immobilizing him. Beryl is impressed once again with the witch's trick, and she explains that she simply put magic in the sword and let her talent do the talking, meaning what she learned in the dojo is still useful to her. Definitely, this fills the master with even more pride, as he feels his work was not in vain with this former apprentice. In the early hours of the following day, Gardnet goes out for a walk before sunrise, a habit he cherishes, especially since he needs to stop being an old country bumpkin and mingle with the city folk. Therefore, he decides to head to the commercial area in the West District, as he promised he would take Feis and Kearney out to eat and needs to find a nice place. Out of nowhere, a very short girl does everything to catch the man's attention, who thinks she's a lost child. This offends the girl, who introduces herself as Lucy Diamond, commander of the Magic Corps of the Liberus Kingdom. Beryl thinks the little girl is delusional and responds that the local kids have some strange games, so Lucy tires of being treated like a child and summons flames in her hand to prove she's not born yesterday. Convinced, she emphasizes that walking is even more fun with company, hinting for him to accept her presence on this pleasant early morning. Thus, the two continue their walk, and Lucy shares that she learned from Feis that her master was in Valtrain. She also emphasizes that her colleague's magic is very good, but she also possesses excellent sword technique, so she believes the teacher made a difference there. Beryl asks if the young lady would like to learn something similar, and Lucy corrects him that she is older than the man to be treated as a child. In any case, she leads him to a sort of arena on a vacant lot where a building once stood. She then tells him that she loves magic so much that she trains every single day to become stronger, and now it's time to test what she has learned so far. Beryl agrees that it's important to assess where we are in our learning, but he didn't expect that he would be the scapegoat. Moreover, he finds out when he dodges a fire spell from the commander, who attacked without warning. With a smile on her face, she praises her opponent's reflexes and displays a circle of flames around her body to show she is not joking. Seeing no way out, the swordsman unsheathes his weapon and positions himself for the confrontation. Ironically, after attacking, she asks if the guy is ready, and he admits he's not, but he needs to protect himself anyway. Lucy reminds him that it's important to see how much they've evolved, and that she's a good opponent for that, but it's Beryl who doesn't think he's a good adversary for someone to test their powers. On that note, Lucy gathers all the flames into a single ball and hurls it at the swordsman, deciding to settle the matter herself. With a not-so-agile leap, the seasoned teacher dodges, becoming barbecue. The mage continues to hurl fire after fire at her target, always with a smile on her face. After feeling the heat increasingly throbbing around his body, Beryl now needs to prepare for a new challenge. Lucy Diamond has just conjured ice spheres to throw. Nonetheless, displaying all his brilliance, the sensei masterfully cuts through the frozen projectiles, and Lucy acknowledges the guy is strong. When she resumes conjuring flames, Beryl charges at her, but keeps in mind that he can't hurt the girl. So, all that's left is to knock her out. The professor tries to hit the opponent with the hilt of his sword, but she wraps her body in an incredible chain of fire and retaliates with a rain of flames, proving even more challenging for the adversary. This time, the threat comes from above and at a dizzying pace, severely hindering Beryl's chance to protect himself effectively. Mockingly, Lucy asks if her colleague has ever faced a witch before, and he confesses it's his first time. In his opinion, swordsman and witch is the worst combination possible. Then, escaping the rain, Beryl sees a huge ice sphere being thrown at his head. With great effort, he stops the sphere with his sword and hurls it at his rival, who shatters the ice with her fire. Beryl takes advantage of the smoke to attack unexpectedly, but he himself is surprised by the electric magic the witch uses to repel the man. From there, she boasts about having saved the best for last, then begins to conjure around herself a bizarre layer of dark energy so dense it prevents Beryl from moving. Obviously, he knew he'd be in deep trouble if hit by any spell in that situation. But to his surprise, Lucy Diamond gives up on continuing her attack and stops the conjuring, arguing that this spell wouldn't work either, since none of the others had. On the other hand, Gardnet would like to know what would happen if he were hit at that moment, and she reveals that he would be crushed into minced meat. although she had adjusted the power to leave the opponent slightly minced, perhaps like an omelet. Anyway, the witch acknowledges that the swordsman is strong and understands why Feis admires him so much. But Beryl is sure the witch would have had human minced meat for lunch if she had gone all out in that fight. For although he's been on this road a good while, he still hasn't defeated his old man to this day. That is, he has a lot to learn. The witch finds the guy's humility amusing, especially since he doesn't even seem to be upset about the cowardly attack he received. About that, he admits it was a drag. Then the girl bursts into laughter. Beryl reflects that it's impossible to be angry at someone like that, and Lucy invites her colleague to drop by the Magic Institute any day. Besides, she'd like to learn the spells she learned from the sensei, but he dismisses this possibility right away. The next day, after giving his training, Beryl is surprised by the presence of Faisal, who came to deliver some potions to the order, as the Corps of Magic typically sells such items to this organization. Beryl comments that these potions are quite useful, and that he usually uses more of the herb ones, so Feis gives him one of the bottles, saying it's an apology from Commander Lucy. Confirming that the little girl is indeed an officer, the professor does not hide his astonishment, and Feis explains that Lucy uses magic to appear young, but that no one knows exactly how old she is. The man takes the opportunity to comment on the fight the two had and admits he almost turned into minced meat. And the girl replies that Diamond is indeed a prodigy, since normal witches don't cast spells in sequence, but she can. With that, Alucia Citrus approaches and thanks Feis for the delivery of the potions, then the mage withdraws to finish the job. Soon, Alucia asks the professor for a minute of his time to make a proposal to him. Joined with Suriana Lysandra, they invite the professional to train new adventurers on a request documented by the leader of the adventurers group. In this service, Beryl Gardnant must assess the abilities of these students before the first attack on the dungeon, as well as train them for emergencies. Beryl remembers that he himself was quite interested in the career of an adventurer, because depending on what you find in those labyrinths, you can indeed make good money, so he threw himself wholeheartedly into that field. Thinking to himself, he also remembers getting thrashed by a monster and running back home. Therefore, he argues that dungeons are dangerous. Lysandra assures him that the people will be fine if trained by him, and Alucia confesses she is not at all pleased with Lysandra's invitation, but understands it's a good way for the professor to train his skills. Although the two think alike, Beryl notices they seem to have a feud and doesn't understand the reason for it. In the end, Alucia asks that the tutor at least hear what the leader has to say, as the order gives complete freedom to special instructors, so the choice is entirely up to Beryl. Following that, Lysandra takes Beryl to a meeting with the boss, and there was Lucy Diamond for some reason, feeling completely at home and having a nice little tea. Lysandra explains that the commander of the Corps of Magic knows the leader of the adventurers group well, while the leader himself introduces himself as Nidus, who believes his organization is in good hands, since the instructor before him has the support of Lysandra and the twin swords of the dragon. Lucy comments that she also spoke highly of the professor to Nidus, and Beryl concludes that no one cares about his opinion there, it seems. Next, the group leader introduces Majin, his assistant, who will be responsible for providing all the details Gardnant needs to know for the job. Before that, Majin wants to confirm one thing. He knows that Gardnant has the support of the commander and a black class, but he believes that having an amateur participate in an attack is not wise. Embarrassed and relieved, Beryl sips his tea and celebrates the emergence of this hero to free him from this burden. Outraged, Lysandra accuses the assistant of disrespecting the master, while Lucy questions whether the man does not trust her word. Majin replies that the adventurers group is responsible for all decisions made and that there have been reports of unusual monster activity recently. Therefore, it is important that the candidate proves his worth for this difficult job by dueling with Lysandra and the twin dragon swords. Beryl is shocked, although everyone else present thinks it's a great idea. Nidus asks if the sensei is willing to undergo this ordeal, and he awkwardly agrees. Thus, the leader of the adventurers group drags the master to the training field at the headquarters, where the organization's members are surprised to witness a battle between the famous Lysandra and a middle-aged man they do not know. Already regretting being there, Beryl reflects that this woman is a black-class adventurer. In turn, the girl seems very pleased to finally challenge her master, something she had been looking forward to for a long time. This brings the adventurer back to a memory from her childhood when she was riding in a carriage filled with goods that would earn money for 76 months if sold in that region they were heading to. The girl's parents understood that the life of a merchant was very difficult, but they had faith that they could provide a decent life for their daughter. Suddenly, their carriage is attacked by a ferocious creature that tears apart the coachman. Shurna, Lysandra's mother, urges the girl to run away through the back to escape the beast, but the monster overturns the carriage and causes Shurna to fall from a cliff into a river below with a very strong current. Sometime later, the child woke up and saw for the first time the man who would become her master, Beryl Gardnet. She was rescued and taken in by him at his home, where Beryl cared for the girl so she could recover. At one point, when he asked what had happened, the trauma trigger of the little girl was activated, and she lost control of herself, as if the mere chance of remembering the event caused her physical pain. At that time, Beryl still lived with his parents, and while everyone wondered what happened to the girl's relatives, Beryl asked the homeowners to let him take care of Shurna until she found a new home. Day after day, Shurna was apathetic, irritable, and spoke little, but people showed patience with her and kept her under their care. One day, Shurna opened the window of her room and saw Beryl training with a wooden sword. Seeing that the child was interested, the man encourages her to try, and this experiment soon became a habit in the girl's routine, who grew up alongside the one who would become her master in the art of the sword. Together, the two practiced and developed in each other's company, and this blossoming relationship was the most important factor for Shurna to regain confidence in her life. After some time training only at home, the little girl got the opportunity to attend the dojo, and since then her life changed when she wore that uniform and felt she belonged to that universe as one of Beryl's official apprentices. Always kind and respectful, the sensei praised the student's speed and believed that one day she would do well with the twin swords. As days passed, Beryl and his parents found a new family for Shurna, but they made it clear when she left that their doors would always be open for her to visit. Moved, the girl thanked her master for everything he had done and left in tears with her new family. In fact, Shurna Lysandra wanted to have stayed at the dojo forever, but she thought it would be selfish to ask for more than she had already received there. 20 years after leaving Beryl's home, Lysandra quickly rose in rank in the adventurers group and reached the gold class at a young age. When asked why she became an adventurer, she said she wanted to see the world with her own eyes. On a particular day of her life, the carriage she was protecting was attacked by a group of bandits, who, according to her escort companion, were led by a notable swordsman from that region. Nevertheless, without a second thought, Lysandra charged at the bandits and defeated them all with ease using her twin swords. Indeed, she did not become an adventurer just for the reasons she mentioned earlier. In addition, her desire was that as few people as possible go through what she went through, in addition to the mission of putting into action everything she learned from her master. Now, facing the man who gave her a new life, Shurna Lysandra greets the sensei in the same way she used to do when she was a child, and he smiles seeing that she remembers how they used to do it. Whether or not she was his student, the teacher thinks the best way to show respect to her is by providing a worthy confrontation. At that moment, Lysandra attacks from above with her wooden twin blades. Beryl is forced to stay on the defensive against such above-average speed, and the level of quickness she reached, although Beryl knew to some extent, reached a level that left him astounded as he struggled to block each attack that was launched. The thrill of facing her master, on the other hand, disrupted the adventurer's rhythm, who couldn't hit the target, but she already imagined she wouldn't be able to even if she were in her fullest condition. Regardless, the girl's dream was to face the sensei with the strength she has today, and the act of realizing this wish makes the woman's face break into a smile. Meanwhile, Beryl evaluates every move of the former student and mentally praises the endless stamina of this warrior who never stopped practicing her skills at all costs. But amid this, he discovers a weak point of the opponent, then sticks his sword in the handle of Lysandra's weapon and disarms her left hand. Then, he takes advantage of the element of surprise to throw his opponent down and pin her to the ground, declaring his victory. The adventurers around were ecstatic after witnessing the impressive duel, and Nidus admitted it was incredible. Lysandra, as always, praised her master's strength, though he acknowledged that he would have lost if the fight had lasted another 10 seconds. He realized that the girl hadn't fully mastered her left hand yet, and she admitted she needed to practice making it as powerful as her dominant hand. Lucy arrived, laughing at the sight of the instructor giving advice to an advanced class, while Majin apologized for doubting Gardnet. Humble as usual, Beryl thought these things happen, as Nidus entrusted the novice adventurer's training to the master swordsman. Thus, Beryl regretted not being able to refuse the offer in the end. The next day, Lysandra introduced his first apprentices. The young man in the middle was named Porta, the girl was called Nidri, and the boy on the left was Sarlicat. Porta and Nidri were bronze class, and Sarlicats was silver class. At the beginning of their training, they stormed into a cave, and Sarlicats identified 6 enemies approaching through a magical accessory. Without delay, 3 goblins ambushed to catch the humans off guard, but the young fighters easily defeated them. Beryl thought these guys didn't even need him, given the way they fought. Hours later, the dungeon had been completely scoured, and its monsters eliminated. On their way out, Beryl commended the apprentices' performance, as did Lysandra, but the advanced class found it strange that they had encountered so few enemies, as it was usual to find many more. Suddenly, Sarlicats's magical accessory broke, and out of nowhere, a winged creature struck Porta with its claws. Faced with what seemed to be a griffin, Shurna had no doubts. It was a specially designated target, known as Xenograble, likely the reason there were no more monsters around. Immediately, Beryl thinks about the luck he had to come face to face with such a monster when he didn't even want to be part of this mess. He asks Shurna if she has any potions, and she confirms she has 2 magical ones. With that, the professor considers helping Porta while his former student fights the griffin. But Shurna misunderstands the plan completely and runs to save her companion, leaving the swordsman in a one-on-one battle against Xenograble. Soon, a fight breaks out between the two, and despite his advanced age, Beryl manages to tank the enemy with ease. However, even though he strikes the beast with his sword, its armor is so tough it seems like steel. On the other hand, the human knows he would be headed for his coffin if he took even a single blow. Meanwhile, Shurna Lysandra rushes with Porta into the dungeon, and Beryl knows he needs to buy more time, but ends up taking a hit that, although blocked with his weapon, is strong enough to throw him several meters and open a considerable wound on his left arm. Not letting this defeat him, he assesses that the creature's weak point must surely be its face, so he tries to get as close as possible. However, just as he moves a few steps closer, he almost becomes a barbecue when the opponent shoots a fireball from its beak. Beryl still tries to take advantage of the proximity to strike the griffin, but the monster manages to escape and retaliate with a tail swipe. In turn, the master swordsman shows why he was called to the Royal Order of Knights and manages to cut off Xenograble's tail while shielding himself with the sword. Faced with the severe damage it suffered, the creature enters a state of rage and breathes fire from its beak on a much larger scale than before, forcing Beryl Gardnet to flee with difficulty. Following this, Beryl takes a headbutt he cannot dodge. Then he is dragged into the forest by that brutish bird, which worsens the situation by taking flight with a man on its back. Once he had managed to free himself from the beast's head by circling its body. From that moment on, Gardnet was flying at an unreal height, which would be certain death should he fall. Nevertheless, with great patience and resilience, the man manages to hold on to the monster's feathers until he is set back on the ground. Still enraged, the Xenograble shows another of its tricks by letting out a roar that turns all the ground around into lava, including where Beryl was standing. By protecting himself by jumping onto a nearby rock, the sensei notices the lava spreading to the inside of the dungeon, where his companion is with the injured student and others. Inside, Nidri and Sarlicats try to pull Porta to a safe spot, but the lava had already reached the ceiling of the cave and threatened to turn the adventurers into ashes. Hearing Nidri scream, Beryl realizes he has no more time to waste on this game, so he faces the lava-covered surface with the lightest step he can sustain and tries to deliver a fatal blow to the bird's face. However, the attacks he suffered induce a total frenzy state in Xenograble, which responds with a frightening amount of fireballs that take over the battlefield. In a masterstroke, Beryl patiently dodges each shot and maneuvers around the lava to get back near the griffin. Then, he achieves the exact distance needed to plunge his sword into the enemy's eye, causing irreparable damage. On the other hand, the bird exacts a toll by breaking the human's blade and leaving him unarmed in this conflict. At that moment, Shurna Lysandra finally returns with a surprise leap from behind Xenograble and sinks her twin blades into the back of the monster, ending the tough battle. Having done this, Shurna claims that they were able to defeat the beast thanks to the master's efforts, although he disagrees. Therefore, the warrior acknowledges that she arrived late and gave the griffin room to destroy the sensei's sword, but Beryl only cares about how Porta is doing. The officer assures him that he will be okay, and Beryl sees this with his own eyes when the three young adventurers emerge alive from the labyrinth, although Porta was unconscious. Shurna remarks to the former professor that this situation reminded her of the old days, and the girl's phrase made the man remember a scene that made him agree. Later, Lysandra returns to the guild's headquarters and impresses Nidus, who can hardly believe that they were capable of taking down a specially designated target, especially while protecting 3 recruits at the same time. In turn, Shurna certainly gives due credit to the sensei, for none of this would have been possible without him. According to her, without the professor's presence, everyone would have met their maker much sooner. Nidus doesn't even know how to thank for this, and Majin could expect nothing less from someone who overcame a black-class adventurer. Indeed, the guild leader was about to extend a definitive invitation for the master to join the organization, but Gardnet preemptively declines before the guy could finish his sentence. After the meeting, Shurna comments that Beryl could never be just an adventurer. The man thinks these people overestimate him too much, while the woman bows and apologizes. After all, this happened because she hyped up the sensei too much. Beryl replies that it's not her fault, although this flattery really is a point. But Shurna emphasizes that, indeed, the master is extremely strong, and she is genuinely grateful that he gave her the opportunity to join him in this life or death fight. Beryl thanks her for the same thing, as the girl's decisions were so right that they were responsible for bringing back alive those who went on the mission, and he is happy to see the girl growing so much. Moved, Shurna Lysandra recalls special moments with her eternal master, and this makes her start a speech about the two going back in time one day. But, noticing that she might be overstepping, decides to stop her speech and change the subject. Finally, after all this adventure alongside Lysandra, Beryl Gardnet now finds himself alongside another old apprentice, Kirini, who is taking the rustic man to one of the city's blacksmiths. Still, Beryl swore that Alusha had more to do, so he doesn't understand why she is accompanying this outing. To keep up with the conversation, the commander emphasizes that choosing a good sword is of utmost urgency, and argues that her duty as an officer of the order is to accompany the professor on this significant journey. Beryl tries to hide his embarrassment, while Alusha talks to herself about how Lysandra had taken the task of finding lodging, and Kirini had now stolen the trip to the blacksmith, so she needs to find some way to help with something. Beryl asks if the girl said something, but she deflects. To avoid the awkward atmosphere, the master asks what this blacksmith Kirini is taking him to is like, and she replies that it's best if he just waits and sees for himself. Upon arrival, the professional greets the clients with a warm welcome, and Gardnet recognizes that voice from somewhere. It was Balder, who also recognizes Master Beryl after so many years. The professor is impressed with the shop of his acquaintance, while Alusha asks where they know each other from. Beryl introduces the man as Balder Gasp, another former student of the sensei. Of all the students he taught, Balder was the only one older than the professor himself. Wanting to produce great swords, he thought it would be good to join the dojo to feel what it was like to use one. Beryl is pleased that the blacksmith has managed to start his own business, and Balder questions why he is so pleasantly surprised. Kirini asks the professional to sharpen her short sword, but upon seeing the chips in the blade, the blacksmith thinks it's better for the woman to get another one, as this one has seen better days. Alusha finds it curious that this happened with Kirini's weapon, since she usually takes good care of her equipment. Consequently, Beryl asks how the girl feels wielding a short sword, and she responds that it's comfortable and light. With that answer, both the professor and the blacksmith immediately understand that this is not the right equipment for the order's warrior, because if you can't feel the weight of the weapon you carry, you can't wield it properly. Given this, Gardnet recognizes that she should try the two-handed Zweihänder sword, for although she is short, Kirini is strong, and this sword could fit her style like a glove. Without delay, Balder hands the weapon over for the woman to try, and she admits she thought it would be heavier. As the sensei believes this is the right equipment, Kirini decides to buy the two-handed sword and feels that this beauty truly has a presence. With that settled, it's now time for Beryl himself to think about a sword for him, so he looks around the shop to see if he finds something interesting. Alusha thinks that for someone with his skills, The master should have a custom-made sword, but the man doesn't want to go that far, since, according to him, the weapons there are quite interesting. Suddenly, Shurna enters the shop looking for Balder and encounters a face she certainly did not want to see again, namely, that of Alusha. The two girls engage in another veiled conflict in the competition for the attention of the most desired sensei in Liberis. Beryl intervenes to ease the tension and asks why Lysandra is there, and she explains that she wants to create a long sword from the claw of the slain griffin. Balder is stunned to see that it's a Xenograble, but does not understand why the woman wants another weapon, since hers are quite formidable. Then, she responds that it's for her master to use, as he has made things much easier around there since his arrival. Beryl doesn't think it's fair for him to receive a weapon, since it was the girl who brought the animal's leg there, so Alusha observes that if it were to be fair, the order should have already provided suitable equipment for the hired professional, but she herself can take care of that. At the same time, Lysandra insists that her gift be accepted as a way to repay what the sensei has done for her, especially because she really feels that the fault was hers for what happened in the dungeon. While Gardnant thinks about how to navigate all this drama, Balder tells the guy to just accept the offer, because the girl is really willing to do it. Thus, Beryl thanks the former student for her kindness and accepts her goodwill, delighting Shurna and, consequently, saddening Alusha. As he lays hands on the material from a named monster, the blacksmith looks like a child with a new toy and can hardly wait to start working with it. Despite his excitement, Beryl makes it clear that he just wants a regular sword, and Balder responds that he doesn't plan on doing anything crazy, even though his expression says otherwise. Because of all this talk from Gasp, the swordsman thought the guy felt sorry for Shurna's goodwill, but the truth is that he just wanted to get his hands on that rare material. Finally, Balder asks for a week to manufacture the weapon, and Beryl thinks he has escaped responsibilities for today, but Kirini had other plans for the poor guy. After all, since it was he who recommended the two-handed sword, it would be a good idea for him to pass on some tips on how to use it best. Thus, he takes the woman to the training area and explains that the Zweihänder has two distinct features. The first is that when you strike, you should swing it from side to side, taking advantage of the centrifugal force of the movement, which is a gravitational impulse that gives an effect like a whip at the end of the move, which is much more effective than striking vertically. The second thing is that you can use the ricasso of this weapon as support, which is the part of the blade that is not sharp. In this way, you shift the center of gravity and facilitate handling. Wielding a wooden replica of the Zweihänder, Kirini tries some blows but loses balance. Beryl explains that she must use her hips, not just her arms. Then she follows the advice and manages to improve her movements. Watching the progress of the former student, the professor reflects that this is always the first thing he teaches in the dojo, so it wasn't difficult for Kirini to remember. In fact, this scene makes him recall when the girl was still a child. After the day's training, as night falls, Beryl heads to the tavern to unwind from the day's stress. After all, no one's made of iron. But truthfully, he isn't there just because of the hard day's work. He's actually celebrating the success of his beloved students. After leaving payment for the drinks on the table, the swordsman exits the establishment, and, as he makes his way back to the lodging, he ponders the streets, reflecting on how Kirini is a talented and sweet girl, and that, if she can just refine her sword handling, she'll surely make good use of the Zweihänder. Midway, a hooded girl tries to swipe something from the man, but he notices just in time and grabs her hand. In response, the girl conjures a fireball so vast that it forces Beryl to step back, giving her room to escape. As Gardnant stands still, puzzled by this sudden use of magic, she easily eludes him and reaches a secluded wooden door. Inside, she throws some objects and coins onto a table where men were playing some dice game. According to her, this was the day's haul, but since it was meager, one of the men accuses her of being lazy with her duties. However, another man asserts that Mui would never do such a thing, as she needs to earn her living from it. Ignoring the comments, Mui realizes she accidentally dropped her necklace during the theft from Beryl. Back at the scene of the crime, the sensei picks up the fallen necklace and examines it carefully. The next day, training resumed as usual at the Order of Knights. While Kirini practiced hip balance as instructed by her teacher, Beryl sparred with Hendlitz. Unlike previous sessions, the young man was much better prepared. Just as he was about to land a blow, he suddenly shifted the direction of his sword, aiming for a different part of his opponent's body. Even more impressive, though, was Beryl's ability to block the attack and bring the match to a swift end. Henblitz thanked him for the opportunity, and his sensei praised the progress, especially the feint he pulled off at the end. Without a doubt, Beryl admired Henblitz's determination. He knew he had to stay sharp if he wanted to push the boy even further. Changing the subject, the young swordsman pointed out how bold it was of Kiruni to switch to a two-handed sword. Beryl smiled, pleased to see she was adapting well. According to Henblitz, the order urgently needed to improve its combat strength. Gardnet raised an eyebrow and asked what the rush was about. The boy explained that a gang known as the Twilight Shadow Hand was active in the capital, and both the Royal Guard and the Order were investigating them. Once their hideout was discovered, the authorities would strike with full force. That meant the officers had to be ready, and that's where the teacher's role came in. He trained the soldiers so they could handle the hardest part of the job. Silently, Beryl felt satisfied with that arrangement. He'd never chased criminals himself, and frankly, he hoped to keep it that way. Setting that aside, he showed his students a jewel he'd found the day before on the street. Kiruni leaned in to admire the piece's elegance. Both students assumed the teacher planned to give it to someone, but Kiruni commented that if it were meant for the commander, maybe it should be a little more grown up. Beryl didn't bother explaining anything just yet. Instead, he froze, clearly embarrassed. After training, he finally shared the full story. The necklace had fallen from a pickpocket who bumped into him in the street. She hadn't stolen anything, but she had escaped using magic. That caught the students off guard. Anyone capable of using magic didn't need to steal magic was rare, valuable. Just by enrolling in the Magic Institute, you could become a sorcerer or an adventurer and make a living. It made more sense if she had been hiding magical accessories she'd stolen. As for the necklace, Beryl planned to turn it in as a lost item, hoping it would find its way back to the rightful owner, assuming it had been stolen at all. Henblitz suggested he drop it off at the Order's front desk. That's where lost and found items were handled. Later, after doing just that, Beryl Gardnet left the Order headquarters with a clear conscience. He hadn't lost anything, and he certainly didn't want to go searching for anyone. But shifting thoughts, he couldn't shake the memory of that little girl's eyes. Something about them just didn't feel normal. Passing by a housing board, Beryl paused. He couldn't live at the inn forever. He considered a single-occupant home in the Central District, but the rent was steep. So steep that he'd have to cut back on his drinking just to afford it. Suddenly, he noticed a girl frantically searching for something. Curious, he asked if she was looking for a necklace. The moment she recognized the old man from yesterday, her expression twisted in rage. Without warning, she launched herself at him in the middle of the street, yelling at him to give it back now. Holding her back, Beryl urged her to calm down, not to cause a scene. He explained that he had picked up the necklace and handed it over to the Order. Before anything else, he asked if she had stolen it. She said no. That was all he needed to hear. He offered to go retrieve the necklace for her. If she went alone, it would be much harder to prove it was hers. Left with no choice, the girl reluctantly followed him, though clearly not thrilled about it. On the way, Beryl thought back to the troublemakers at the dojo, but none compared to this one. He tried asking her name. She snapped that she had nothing to say to an old man like him. He told her this wasn't the way to go about things. Hearing that, she turned her head, embarrassed. Beryl noticed. She did know right from wrong. Once they retrieved the necklace, Beryl asked for a word with the girl before giving it back. Alusha showed up, wondering what the commotion was about. The girl was throwing a fit to get her necklace back. Beryl was actually glad the commander had arrived, but that relief quickly turned to shock when Alusha joked that the child might be his daughter. Furious, Beryl dragged her inside so they could talk in private. After explaining everything, Citrus asked what the master planned to do about the girl. But the girl spoke up herself, saying there was nothing they could do. Unless she was caught in the act, no one had the right to touch her. Beryl agreed. He'd never intended to report her anyway. Since that was settled, Citrus told him to just return the necklace already. But Beryl paused. He asked if she was going to stop stealing from people. The girl dodged the question and said the necklace was hers to begin with. Internally, Beryl noted that she never actually denied she'd keep stealing, in a strange way that made her honest. Even Alusha commented on it, saying that boldly telling the commander of the Order you won't stop stealing takes guts. That said, she had another question. Since the girl had used magic, she wanted to know if she'd used a magical accessory. If the child had real talent, the kingdom would take care of her. Alucia couldn't stand the idea of letting someone with a promising future waste it all away. Trying to gain her trust once and for all, Beryl reassured her that they weren't trying to trick her. If something was going on, she could tell them. Little by little, the girl gave in. She explained that if she could pay a man 5 million dalks, he would bring her sister back to life. Of course, she didn't have that kind of money, so she turned to other means. Hearing that, Alucia asked for a moment and stepped out, leaving Beryl alone with the girl. Awkward and unsure of what to say, he offered her something to eat, but all she wanted was to get her necklace and go. Just as she finishes her sentence, her stomach lets out a growl that sounds like an old beat-up car engine loud enough for the man to hear it clearly. Without hesitation, he grabs a piece of bread from somewhere and hands it to the girl, since the table only had sweets. With something savory finally in her hands, the girl doesn't hold back. She devours it without mercy. Curiously, Beryl remarks that he was lucky to have run into this girl, even if she did try to rob him. In the end, she looked so worn down, so fragile, that it melted his already soft heart. Sure, maybe an old man like him can't do much, but maybe just maybe it'd be good for her to open up a little. Talk about what she's going through. Maybe start with her name. So, after Beryl shares his, she finally says hers, Mui Freya. Immediately, the old master hands her necklace back, and the moment she holds it, he can feel her heart soften. That little trinket clearly means the world to her. Either way, Mui says she's leaving, but just then, Lucy Diamond walks into the room, summoned by Alucia. Without missing a beat, the commander of the Magic Corps gets straight to the point. She wants to find out if this little girl really has any magical talent. Mui asks who she is, and when Lucy introduces herself as an officer of the mages, the girl can't believe it, she's even smaller than Mui herself. To prove her wrong, Lucy tells her to drink some tea to relax. It's gone cold. So, without blinking, the witch conjures a small flame and heats up the cup right there. Mui stares, speechless. Then Lucy invites her to join the Magic Institute. But the girl refuses, she doesn't have time. She needs 5 million dalks to bring her sister back to life. Diamond tells her, plainly, that no matter how much she pays, resurrection magic simply doesn't exist. Mui panics. She insists Lucy's lying. Beryl even tries to get her to ease up on the brutal honesty, but Lucy doesn't budge. She doubles down, tearing the child's dream apart with hard truths. Still, Mui refuses to believe it. She saw her sister come back, even if only for a few seconds. One day, a certain mage brought her body back to life just briefly and then gave Mui her sister's necklace as a symbol. A promise that she'd be revived once the money was paid. Lucy doesn't hesitate. She calls it out as a cheap trick. She says resurrection magic doesn't exist and asks Mui straight, does she really want to believe someone who manipulates children or someone who's spent her entire life studying magic? Beryl thinks to himself, of course people believe what gives them comfort, especially a child who barely understands the world. Lucy then asks for the man's name. If he's lying, then he's desecrated the soul of Mui's dead sister. That's something she won't forgive. Seeing the girl devastated, Diamond makes her a promise. If the man is telling the truth, she'll give Mui the 5 million herself, but only if the girl cooperates. Finally, Mui reveals his name, Crepusculo. Diamond stands up. Take me to him. Now. Alucia offers to join them, but Lucy refuses. Knights draw too much attention. Instead, Beryl is to come along. He's not thrilled. He even asks if Lucy really needs backup against one scumbag. But when she insists, he realizes someone has to make this man pay for using a child like Mui. Before nightfall, the three of them make their way through the streets of Liberus, headed to the criminal's hideout. Along the way, Lucy asks if Mui and her sister have always been alone in this world. Mui doesn't want to talk about it, but she admits there were a lot of people like them where they came from. Lucy nods. The Southeast District is full of orphans. It's dangerous, but plenty of witches came from there too. Beryl adds that no matter what kind of upbringing Mui had, what matters most is that she always stays true to herself. Soon, they reach the hideout of the Shadow Hand of Twilight. Beryl can't believe it, it was just one street away from the main road the whole time. Lucy simply shrugs. The best place to hide, she says, is in plain sight. Beryl regrets not bringing his longsword, but Lucy assures him, for a fighter like him, even a wooden blade is more than enough. As she's about to barge in, Mui warns them the front door won't open. The entrance is around back. Lucy doesn't care. She blasts the front gate open with force. Immediately, some thugs inside come running to check what's going on, and Lucy wastes no time blasting the first one to pieces as a warning. She demands to see their leader. Then, spotting stairs leading to a basement, she assumes he's down there. Without waiting for confirmation, she heads down, leaving the rest to Beryl. One of the thugs tries to hit Mui, blaming her for bringing outsiders to their hideout. But the old swordsman steps in, landing a clean strike to the man's neck and dropping him to his knees instantly. Meanwhile, downstairs, Lucy finds a man and asks if he's Crepusculo, the one spreading blasphemy about resurrection magic. He smirks and mocks her. Did the commander of the Magic Corps come here just to play around? Lucy's caught off guard. He knows who she is. Then, without warning, he conjures massive chunks of ice and hurls them at her. Confident as he is, Lucy melts the ice effortlessly with fire. She comments on how magical accessories these days are getting surprisingly strong. And just like that, he uses another artifact to lift Lucy into the air. That's when she realizes that's how he moved Mui's sister's body. He admits it was easy to trick the girl. With a flick of her hand, Lucy takes him down with a surprise spell. Then she scoffs. You're the real child here, thinking your little toys are some weapon against the real world. Back upstairs, Beryl fights off several opponents with ease, each strike powerful enough to knock them out cold. One by one, the thugs drop like flies, and Mui watches, wide-eyed, in awe of the strength this old man has. The last goon, still conscious, swears that the girl will pay for what she did. Beryl knocks him out cold with the final blow, no second chances. After that, Lucy floated in, carrying Crepusculo, who was barely conscious. She asked if resurrection magic was real. He admitted it wasn't and pleaded to be released, but passed out before he could say more. When Mui realized she'd been lied to, tears welled up in her eyes. Lucy, determined to fix things, left to call the order and deal with the criminals, while Beryl stayed behind to keep an eye on them. Meanwhile, Mui made her way down to one of the coffins in the underground chamber, the one where her sister's body was supposed to be. But for some reason, it was gone. All that remained was her necklace. And now, Mui had no idea what to do or where to go. Beryl thought to himself that he hadn't known this girl for long, but still, he hoped she would live a long and happy life. Seeing her in such despair, the old swordsman promised they would take care of her because that's what grown-ups are supposed to do. But Mui didn't understand where those adults were. Every adult she'd ever met claimed to be taking care of her and her sister, but all they ever did was use them. Beryl admitted that some adults were like that, but not all. Still, he knew his words didn't sound all that convincing. Mui couldn't understand why this old man cared so much. And truth be told, Beryl didn't really know either. He just remembered the rage he felt when that last guy said the child had to pay for what she did. Gardnant admitted that lunatic deserved to be hit even harder, and for the first time, Mui seemed to trust the swordsman just a little. Later that night, the order arrived to round up the criminals and load them into the institution's wagon. Lucy noted that the gang leader had way too many magical accessories for a group of low-level thugs. That could only mean one thing: someone else was pulling the strings. When Alusha announced that the prisoners would be interrogated the next day, Lucy volunteered to take care of Mui in the meantime, leading her somewhere safe. Unbeknownst to them, a hooded man had been watching everything. As the order's wagon began to roll away, he reached out his hand and triggered something inside Crepusculo. The man's body lit up from within, glowing intensely. Later, back in his hidden lair, the hooded figure reported to his superior that he had successfully silenced Crepusculo, thanks to the magical device planted inside him. Dressed in the robes of a religious authority, the man in charge nodded, satisfied. Crepusculo had done well, and with the materials he'd gathered, they could now recreate the miracle of God with their own hands. The next day, after a training session wrapped up, Alusha asked for a moment to speak with the master. In a more private setting, she revealed that Twilight had been killed while being transported under guard to prison. According to witnesses, he simply exploded, leaving behind only the magical accessories that had been embedded in his body. Those are now being investigated with the help of the magic core. Apparently, Twilight's subordinates had no clue this would happen, which ties back to what Lucy Diamond had mentioned. Someone else had been pulling this guy's strings from the shadows. In the following scene, Beryl returns to the blacksmith to finally receive the custom sword he ordered, crafted specifically from the bones of a named beast. The swordsman felt the weapon was a bit too flashy for an old man like himself, but Kirani assured him it suited him perfectly. In fact, she added, just sensing the blade's sharpness from a distance sent chills down her spine. Convinced, the professor decided it was time to put the weapon to the test. On the way back to the training hall, Beryl admitted he could never fully relax while wearing a sword at his waist. As the two walked, they crossed paths with Lucy, who wanted a word with the master, unfortunately cutting short Kirani's plans to watch the sword's trial run. Duty called, and so the professor made his way to Lucy Diamond's mansion. At the entrance, he asked her how things had turned out with Mui. Lucy said she'd encouraged the girl to enroll in the Institute of Magic. They sat down for tea inside, joined by a man named Ibroy Hellman, a priest of the Church of Sphene, a region also known as Svenigardvania, neighbors to Liberus and founders of the Sphene faith. According to the mage and the priest, all of Twilight's magical accessories had been crafted in Sphene and implanted in him by Bishop Revios Sarlian, who had hired Twilight to collect bodies for him. But once Twilight was caught, he was likely eliminated, silenced via magical remote control. Revios had been gathering the corpses of the deceased in pursuit of what he called the miracle of Sphene. Lucy explained that what Sphene refers to as miracles are what most other regions call sorcery. The priest added that of all miracles, the most sacred is said to be performed by Sphene alone, the one true God, and is known as the resurrection of the dead. As far as anyone knows, it's nothing more than legend, but Bishop Revios is determined to find out if it can be made real. Naturally, something has to be done, but it's not that simple. Revios is currently in the Church of Sphene, located in the Northern District, right here in the Kingdom of Liberus. The Order plans to summon him as a witness tomorrow. Ideally, he'll comply, but if he flees to his homeland, getting to him would become nearly impossible. That's why it's crucial to apprehend him as soon as possible. If the Magic Corps or the Order confront the Church of Sphene directly, it could explode into an international scandal. And for a simple priest like Ibroy, going up against a bishop is out of the question. That's where Beryl Gardnet comes in. With that in mind, Beryl remembered that by taking on this mission, there was a chance he could find Mui's sister's body, giving the poor girl the chance to grieve properly and say goodbye with honor. With that thought, the master swordsman accepted the task. As he was leaving the mansion, Beryl bumped right into Mui herself, just arriving with a basket of goods Lucy had asked her to pick up. He was glad to see Lucy taking good care of the girl and commented on how much she'd changed. His words struck something deep in Mui, who still didn't understand why this man was being so kind to her. Lucy gently explained that it's natural for adults to want to care for children. Even so, Mui remained puzzled. After all, she'd once tried to steal from the professor, and now these two were giving her a home. Beryl could see her confusion and told her not to dwell on it. Instead, he urged her to focus on relaxing and enjoying this new life, because no one here would ever take advantage of her. In other words, she had a bright future ahead. Hearing that, Mui let her guard down just a little, still wary, but touched. It wasn't easy for someone her age to process everything that was happening, but the emotions finally broke through, and the girl steeled herself to keep moving forward, no matter what. Meanwhile, Revios received a long-awaited shipment, and Beryl kept both eyes on the bishop's every move. While shadowing the religious figure, he was suddenly approached in the street by a hooded man. The stranger pulled back his hood and recognized the professor immediately as the one responsible for Twilight's downfall. Beryl figured this guy must be one of Sphene's knights, one of Revios's underlings, and he was right. The man called in backup to deal with the intruder. He quickly withdrew, leaving 3 guards behind to handle Gardnet. Together, they invoked a miracle, channeling the strength of their god, Sphene. With their enhanced bodies, they engaged the master swordsman, putting his life in real danger, something Beryl hadn't felt in a long time. But he had no choice but to face the threat head-on. Dodging one of the soldier's strikes, Beryl slashed the man's gut without hesitation, finally confirming just how deadly sharp his new sword truly was. The remaining two attacked, and soon 3 more reinforcements joined the fight. But a sudden burst of magic tore across the battlefield, scattering the group and saving Beryl's skin. Faisal had arrived, spell still fresh in the air, rushing to stand by her old master. Kirani wasn't far behind, wielding her two-handed sword as she took on the enemy forces. According to them, they just happened to be passing by when they saw the professor in trouble, though Beryl wasn't fully convinced by their story. Regardless, both women were determined to protect him, fighting with everything they had. They showcased their full talent and strength, taking down soldier after soldier without giving them a chance to retaliate. Eventually, the knight's enhancements began to fade, though fresh reinforcements kept pouring in. Confident, the girls told Beryl they could handle the rest. With that assurance, the master swordsman took off, resuming his investigation. Without hesitation, he steps into the church, where he finds Bishop Revios standing beside the commander of the men stationed outside. Revios calls him Spur and orders him to deal with the intruder, but he doesn't sit back either. With a prayer, he reveals to Beryl the power of his god. The crates that had arrived as shipments were filled with corpses. And now, these once dead bodies rise, crawling out of their coffins to hunt Beryl down like zombies. To the swordsman's dismay, one of them is unmistakably Mui's sister. He recognizes the necklace she always wore, and the striking blue hair makes it undeniable. To him, this is anything but a miracle. Still, after bringing one of the undead down with clear disgust, Beryl knows he has no choice. He slices the next one's head off with less hesitation, and moves on, decapitating each of them one by one. As their heads roll, the bodies vanish in flickers of eerie blue flame. At last, Mui's sister gets close enough that there's no way to ignore her. But instead of drawing his blade right away, Beryl embraces the girl, mourning what's become of her. Only then does he slice through her neck, granting her the same release as the others. Slowly, she dissolves like dust in the wind, swallowed by the same blue fire, leaving nothing behind but the necklace she once shared with her sister. Beryl takes it with him, along with the guilt of having taken part in such a wretched, heartbreaking scene. Spur, on the other hand, looks completely unfazed. In fact, he begins to pray, calling on divine strength to empower his body for the battle ahead. Once done, he charges at Gardnet with terrifying speed and displays inhuman strength. Despite the flurry of blows threatening his life every second, the seasoned professor manages to hold his ground. In Beryl's eyes, this warrior moves better than Shurna and hits harder than Henblitz, a lethal combination for anyone who has to face him. And as if things weren't bad enough, one of Spur's strikes actually wounds Beryl, something that hasn't happened since he joined the Order. There's no doubt now, he's in serious danger. But there's no way he'll let someone who toys with human lives walk away from this. With a burst of speed, Beryl returns to the fight and lands a blow on Spur's arm. Even injured, the knight insists he won't fall, not while a miracle protects his body. Then, in a disturbing act, Spur stabs his own arm with a dagger and seems to grow even stronger. From that point on, his intensity escalates along with the twisted pleasure on his face. Beryl is soon covered in wounds, slashed across his limbs again and again, but the sheer refusal to lose keeps him standing. Spur lunges forward with a frontal attack that grazes Beryl's shoulder. But Beryl's counter is devastating. He now has both space and stance to strike, and lands a deep gash in Spur's forearm. He follows with a brutal slash across Spur's chest, forcing the knight back and interrupting his next move. Blood starts pouring from Spur's wounds, but instead of collapsing, he drives his sword into the floor to prop himself up. Beryl can hardly believe he's still standing. Then, Spur launches at him again, but this time, his insides begin to spew blood violently. And to make things worse for him, his physical enhancement wears off. Even so, he keeps pushing forward, like a ticking bomb, like a dead man walking. And though he makes it close once more, his sword slips from his grasp, and his body finally crashes to the ground. Beryl denounces the knight's wicked ways, but Spur simply says the old man would never understand. And truthfully, Beryl agrees with that much. With Spur defeated, Beryl leaves the church and finds his two former students standing beside a captured Bishop Revios. Yet even in chains, the bishop doesn't consider himself beaten. He claims that his capture changes nothing, because Svenigardvania is doomed unless the Church of Sven regains its power. According to him, miracles born before blood are what the faithful must wield to save the world. The next morning, Gardnet returns to Lucy Diamond's home. By now, she already knows everything that went down in the church. Beryl expresses regret for not being able to save Mui in the end, but Lucy doesn't waste a second on his guilt. Instead, she moves straight to his reward. She leads him to a house, a gift she's giving him. After all, he's been living in an inn since arriving in the capital. Lucy invites him to take a look at his new home, and there, inside, is Mui herself, sweeping the floor. She's decided to enroll in school at last. All that's left is figuring out whether she'll be living with Beryl, and the professor is completely caught off guard by the idea. Since Mui needs either a parent or a legal guardian to enroll, Beryl could sign the papers. But if he wanted to, he could go beyond that. He could be her guardian not just on paper, but in truth. Her father in every way that matters. After dropping that bombshell, Lucy tells Mui what Beryl did for her the night before. It's time, she says, for the girl to believe that there are still adults willing to do good for her. Upon hearing those words, Mui walks down the hallway and asks if she can have one of the rooms. But before anyone can answer, she steps right in as if she already lived there. And that's when Beryl realizes he just gained a daughter. The smile on his face says it all. He knows there's no turning back now. And so, the two of them began a quiet, ordinary life in that charming little house Beryl had just earned fair and square after so many tough jobs. A garden, running water, even a bathtub. 5 days in, the man from the countryside admitted he still hadn't quite gotten used to life in the capital, but he kept going, doing what he could. After all, he never imagined he'd end up living with a teenage girl, especially one who wasn't exactly easy to deal with, thanks to her troubled past. Beryl did his best to be kind and helpful. He cooked, offered to do her laundry, but it seemed like she made a point of keeping her distance. She even had this habit of asking permission to go to the bathroom, forcing him to remind her that this was her home too. There was no need to be so formal. Later that day, as they walked through the streets of the city side by side, Beryl reflected on how he was used to working with girls her age back at the dojo, but living with one. That was a whole different story. And things were only going to get harder if she kept putting up that emotional wall. Trying to break the ice, the swordsman bought her a skewer from a street vendor, something Kiruni and Faisal had recommended, and figured his adopted daughter might like it too. In his head, this was Operation Walk, Eat, and Talk, his grand strategy to bridge the emotional gap between them. Next, Beryl took Mui to a theater and invited her to see a play. Coming from the countryside, he'd never had the chance to do something like that. Shyly, Mui agreed, and so the two spent the entire afternoon watching a dramatic story unfold on stage, a tale of a messy, complicated romance. Afterward, Beryl thought the experience had been totally worth it. Mui, on the other hand, was annoyed by how selfish the main character had been, but she kind of liked the show anyway. Beryl disagreed. He thought the heroine was the selfish one. Still, he hoped their little debate would spark some real conversation and help bring them closer. But the next day, the distance between them was still crystal clear. Gardnet, her guardian, tried to accompany her to register at the Magic Institute, but she clearly wanted to handle it on her own. Regardless, he stayed with her until they reached the school gates. There, Beryl was surprised to see students in the front yard using magic to levitate a huge rock. Before long, a teacher named Kinra Fine approached them and kindly offered to show them around the school. Beryl, a bit awkward, accepted, while Mui froze up in a way that was both unexpected and kind of adorable. Kinra chuckled at how nervous the two of them were, then led them through the halls. As they walked through the spacious corridors, Beryl was impressed. Even the windows were made of glass. When Kinra asked who had introduced him to the institute, the swordsman casually mentioned it had been, Commander Diamond herself. The teacher was stunned to hear that the director had invited them personally. A couple of students walked by and greeted Kinra respectfully. Beryl commented on how polite they were, and she explained that every student here has the potential to become the most powerful mage in the country. Good manners are part of the curriculum. That said, Beryl quietly wondered how long it would take Mui to adjust to the school's way of doing things. Kinra led them into a room and explained that Mui wouldn't need to take an entrance exam. Her letter of recommendation from the director made her admission automatic. All she had to do was pick a specialization based on her strengths and weaknesses. Looking a bit embarrassed, Mui admitted she only knew how to conjure fire. Kainra recommended she consider offensive magic. She went on to explain the 5 categories: offensive, defensive, healing, enhancement, and lifestyle magic. Fire spells, clearly offensive. Aside from that, Mui also had to choose whether or not to live in the school's dormitory. So Kainra showed her the place so she could make an informed decision. The moment Mui stepped inside, her jaw dropped. The dorm was massive and beautiful. In the cafeteria, students were served 3 well-balanced meals a day. Then came the bathhouse. Kainra mentioned it worked on a rotating schedule, so there wasn't a lot of time to really unwind. Finally, Mui got to see one of the furnished rooms she could stay in, if she chose to. On their way out, after admitting the dorm was straight out of a dream, Beryl invited her to lunch in the central district before heading home. Deep down, he hoped she'd take the chance to live in such an amazing place, though he worried she might struggle to fit in with the other kids. Maybe they'd find her odd. Or maybe she only acted that way around older men, and she'd open up more around boys her own age. Eventually, they arrived at a charcuterie, but the place was packed, so Beryl decided to look for another spot. That's when Shurna suddenly showed up and invited her old master to share a table. The first thing Beryl did was thank her for the new sword. She waved it off, saying it was the least she could do. After another swig from her mug, she asked who the girl with him was. Beryl paused, trying to figure out where to even begin explaining such a complicated story. He finally told her this was Mui, the girl he was responsible for, and who was currently living with him. At that, Shurna nearly choked on her drink for some mysterious reason. After coughing up a storm, she apologized for butting in. Once the food arrived, Beryl asked how work was going. She said monster hunts near the capital had picked up this time of year. He asked if there were seasonal monsters or something, but she clarified it wasn't about the monsters. A delegation from Svenigardvania was coming to visit the adventurers of Liberus for their annual Allies Summit. The hunts were part of an effort to make the city safer before they arrived. Honestly, Beryl was surprised to hear that even adventurers had national duties. After lunch, Beryl asks Mui to head home, since he still needs to stop by the Order's headquarters. Before she leaves, he asks Shurna to offer the girl some advice, especially now that she's about to start at the Magic Institute. In her usual blunt way, the Black Class adventurer makes it clear that the Institute is only for the best and it's going to be anything but easy. And if Beryl Gardnant is her master, then giving up is not an option. Mui admits that the old man is strong, which doesn't sit well with Shurna. She doesn't like the way the girl refers to her sensei. Beryl steps in to calm things down, and that's when Shurna realizes she may have overreacted. She apologizes for her lack of tact, admitting she lost her cool because she considers the master an exceptional person. Either way, since Mui seems to get the message, the adventurer wishes her luck. Mui thanks her and heads off. Beryl has the impression that she opened up a little in front of Shurna. Actually, Shurna even says the girl has potential. She may not have proper manners in the classic sense, but she's not fake either. That kind of honesty can take her far. Beryl agrees, and that's exactly why he thinks she needs the right environment to grow, though he has no clue what that might be. Later, in the Order's training hall, the sensei brings the matter to Alusha. Should Mui keep living with him or move into the dorms at the Institute? Upon hearing that the little girl is living with her former instructor, the commander is stunned. It takes her a moment to wrap her head around it. Kirani shows up and jumps into the conversation uninvited, saying that the dorms are the obvious choice. You live under the same roof as the school, you don't have to ride a packed bus across the yellow line at night, and you even get free meals. Just like Feist said, the dorms are a lifesaver. While Beryl understands that side of it, he admits he's afraid Mui might not fit in with the other kids. That's when Henblitz chimes in too, saying it's always better to step out of your comfort zone and dive in head first. In the end, Alusha agrees with both of them, so Beryl goes to hear Lucy Diamond's opinion, and she, too, believes the dorm is the best option. While they're talking, Feist shows up to deliver something to the commander, and Lucy uses the moment to ask if Faisal also lived in the dorms back when she studied at the Magic Institute. She says of course it's convenient, so there's no reason not to. When Lucy mentions that Mui is about to enroll, Feist adds that she might even become her teacher. And for some reason, that entire conversation gets under Beryl's skin. He says goodbye to the women without offering much explanation and leaves abruptly. Feist asks what's gotten into the old man, and Diamond simply replies that he's worried about things he shouldn't be. Left alone with his thoughts, Gardner admits to himself that he had hoped he could be a father figure to Mui, especially since she'd never had one. He'd even felt happy when she'd barged into one of the rooms saying, "This one's mine." But the truth is, she was captivated by the dorms, and he couldn't possibly be a good father figure if he didn't put the girls' preferences first. Eventually, he gets home with a bag of groceries, and Mui asks for a minute. She points to the bottom drawer of a dresser and says there's an annoying sound coming from it that's disturbing her reading. So Beryl moves the furniture and notices a hole in the wall right behind it, and from it, 3 rats come scurrying out. Faced with this critical situation, Beryl flings open every window and door in the house and grabs a broom to deal with the unwelcome tenants. Taking his classic battle stance, he vows to put an end to these vile creatures. Mui tells him to leave the poor things alone and stop being so neurotic, but the old man insists getting bitten by a rat is no joke. With that, he lunges at the little enemies, but his first swings miss thanks to the rodent's agility. Mui says she's used to seeing rats ever since she lived in the Southeast District, and Beryl immediately replies that she won't have to go through that again. That one sentence hits Mui harder than expected. It's the clearest sign yet that Gardner truly wants to give her a better life for some reason. Meanwhile, one of the rats dashes out the front door, but the other 2 seem to taunt the man, spinning and prancing around in what could only be described as mockery. Furious, Beryl watches the duo scurry under the table. Since the broom isn't cutting it, he shrugs off his jacket and decides to use it as an improvised net. The first attempt fails, so does the second, and the third. After the fourth, the sensei snaps and enters berserker mode. He hurls the damn table at one of the rats, pinning it down with a mix of skill, rage, and a dash of overkill. But hey, as the old saying goes, question my methods, not my results. The rat is now secured inside the jacket, fashioned into a makeshift sack on the spot. Still, one last pest remains. It dashes into the bathroom and jumps into the bathtub. Beryl locks onto his final target, tries to grab it by hand, but since he has no clue how a rat thinks, he can't predict its moves. He fails again, and again, and again. The little devil even mocks him, leaping onto his shoulder, dancing circles around him with unbalanced cunning. Suddenly, a burst of flame flashes in front of the rat, making it jump back in panic straight into Beryl's hand. Mui, of course, had come to her fake dad's aid in this impossible mission and ended up being the key to victory. She doesn't say a word, just quietly walks out of the room. As for the rat, enraged by its defeat, it bites its captor's hand, only to be launched out the window in the very next second. And that makes you wonder, was that punishment or liberation? Later that evening, Beryl returned home carrying a bug repellent he'd bought from a bar owner nearby. He placed it at the hole in the wall, right by the entrance, then pushed the dresser back into place and announced he'd be making dinner. Mui, if she wanted, could read something while he cooked. As the pot began to boil, a quiet warmth settled in his chest. Just the thought that Mui had called out to him when she heard something strange made him feel useful, needed, even. And in the end, she'd stepped in to help, which only confirmed to Beryl that if she could be like this with others too, maybe there wasn't anything to worry about. When he noticed her walking into the kitchen, he offered her some bread in case she was hungry before the main dish, but she'd actually come in to help with dinner. Pleased by the gesture, Beryl asked her to peel the bacon. Despite the comfort of that moment, a quiet sadness tugged at him. Now that they were finally getting to know each other better, she was already getting ready to leave. Still, he had to think about what was best for her. Maybe she'd want to go back home for New Year's, maybe for the holidays. A little while later, the meal was ready, and the two of them, father and adopted daughter, shared it at the table. He told her dinner had come together more quickly thanks to her help, and she admitted she'd actually been thinking about improving her cooking skills. Beryl assured her that there was no rush to learn now, but it would be important in the future. Mui, however, made it clear that she wasn't thinking about the future, she needed to learn right now. He didn't quite understand why. After all, the dorm would provide free meals. That's when she told him she'd decided to live right here, in this house. Caught off guard, Beryl tried to reason with her. Surely, she'd be better off in the dormitory. But Mui Freya, young and determined, stood firm. She'd already made up her mind. She'd never really known what it was like to have someone care for her, and now that she had food and shelter, she wanted to give something back. So all the old man had to do was tell her what needed doing. Those words struck Beryl Gardner like poetry, each one sinking in, leaving him completely speechless. Nui added, half joking, that the house would be a mess without her around to deal with the rats, and that finally drew a soft smile from the man. According to her, Beryl always asked what she wanted to eat, but the truth was, all she ever hoped for was something warm. Overwhelmed, Beryl stood up from his chair and promised there'd be soup, stews, and broths every single day. Mui shot him a look and told the weirdo to wipe that creepy grin off his face unless he wanted to scare her back into the dorms. The next day, during training, Alusha approaches the instructor with something important, something that could directly affect his future. A few students glance at the commander with worried expressions, imagining some dramatic catastrophe. But in the end, it's just this: they need new clothes. According to her, a delegation from Svenigardvania is arriving in Baltrain. Beryl casually mentions that Shurna already told him about it, which makes the commander visibly annoyed once again. The adventurer got ahead of her in this unspoken rivalry for the instructor's heart. Trying to mask her irritation, Alusha adds that the order has been tasked with protecting the visiting authorities during their stay. Beryl asks if the leaders of the Church of Sven are coming as well. But Henblitz explains that no, they're not. The country's diplomatic matters are handled by Parliament, which is led by the royal family. Alusha then says that, in addition to helping with security, she wants to arrange a meeting between Beryl and the royal families of both nations. Kiruni and Henblitz think it's a great opportunity to raise the professor's profile, but he doesn't seem thrilled. True to form, humble and shy as always. Alusha knows he's not a fan of the spotlight, but she reminds him that he's a special instructor appointed under the royal seal, which comes with certain responsibilities. With no real way to back out, Gardner accepts. With that settled, the commander says he'll need to dress appropriately for the occasion, and since he doesn't know the city's clothing stores, the conversation lands exactly where she wanted. She offers to take him to a renowned tailor. Once again, Beryl finds himself with no choice but to accept the invitation. After she leaves, the two students are left wondering whether her eagerness to accompany the special instructor might have a hidden motive. That evening, after training, Beryl arrives home and Mui lets him know that a package came in for him. He opens it and finds a box filled with women's clothing, along with a note that reads, "Dear Beryl, please accept this gift as a token of my gratitude." There's no name on the note, and Beryl wonders if it might have been from Father Ibroy. Mui remarks that the frilly clothes definitely don't seem like her style. Her dad laughs and tells her to take a look anyway, there's plenty to choose from. Later, during dinner, he tells her he's been assigned to protect some important guests and needs to buy something nice to wear. He's going out with Alusha tomorrow afternoon. He even invites her to come along, but she immediately says no. He presses a little, saying that Citrus is great with kids, but this time she refuses with a hint of irritation. That makes him pause. What's got her acting this way? Truth is, trying to understand girls her age, it's just beyond him. The next day, Beryl meets up with the commander of the Royal Order of Knights who, instead of her usual armor, is dressed in a casual outfit. The professor compliments her, saying she looks beautiful, and of course, she's totally flustered. Either way, the two set off toward the tailor shop. Meanwhile, Henblitz and Kiruni follow from a distance, trying their best to stay out of sight. At the shop's entrance, Beryl takes a deep breath and reflects on how amazing the central district of Baltrain is. There's just something in the air that smells like quality. Even though he feels good, he admits to his friend that he's also a little out of place. Alusha assures him he's gonna survive. When they step inside, the tailor welcomes Miss Citrus with enthusiasm and grace. Beryl, on the other hand, looks like a kid in a candy store, wide-eyed, overwhelmed, staring at the endless rows of clothes like his brain might short-circuit. Unfortunately, the country boy doesn't trust his own sense of style when it comes to picking something for such an important event, so he leaves it to Alusha. But the lady picks out a hideous doublet and asks if he likes it. Despite the shopkeeper hyping it up, Beryl holds firm and asks for something else. It's in that moment he starts to wonder if leaving this mission in her hands was a mistake. If he doesn't step in soon, he's gonna walk out of there looking like grandma's living room curtains. To prevent that, he shows interest in a simple brown outfit. Alusha thinks it's a bit too plain, but Gardner says it's exactly what he wants. So she asks the shopkeeper to hold on to it. For now, they'll check out a few more stores before making a final decision. As they leave the shop, the two students keep their eyes on them. Alusha invites the professor to lunch, and when he agrees, she lights up. That's when Kiruni and Henblitz start to feel like, yeah, there might actually be something going on here. Citrus takes Gardner to a restaurant so fancy, he looks completely out of his element. If she hadn't picked this place, there's no way he would have come here alone. When the food arrives, the dish is so beautifully presented, the man almost feels bad eating it. Meanwhile, Alusha, smirking to herself, quietly celebrates pulling off what is basically a date with the professor, while pretending it isn't one. She starts laughing uncontrollably. Beryl asks if she's okay, and she quickly realizes, yeah, she may have gone a bit too far. Hidden behind a potted plant, Henblitz and Kiruni watch it all unfold. Neither of them has ever seen the commander so happy before. Kiruni even comments that this really has turned into a proper date. Drought, taking the moment to tease her, says that must mean they're on a date too, but Kiruni does everything she can to convince him that this is definitely not the same thing. As evening falls, Beryl and Alusha return home. Despite all the shops they visited, he ends up sticking with the very first outfit. At one point, a memory crosses Alusha's mind of a time when the professor took the blame for letting her go alone to a neighboring dojo to retrieve a hair accessory, and she ended up in danger. That day, he invited her to grab a bite to cheer her up when she was crying. They never actually ate anything, but today felt like they finally got to go back and finish that moment. Without saying any of this out loud, Alusha says her goodbyes, and the two part ways, each heading down their own path. Keeping an eye on the situation, Kiruni notices that the commander doesn't take her eyes off the instructor as he walks away. Meanwhile, Henblitz approaches his superior and casually admits he'd spent the entire day spying on her. Surprisingly, she doesn't seem the least bit embarrassed and tells him she has nothing to hide, no matter what he might have seen. So, Henblitz asks what exactly does the instructor mean to her? The next day during training, Kiruni apologizes for bailing right after Henblitz lost it and confessed everything to their superior. But he reassures her he didn't mention she'd been spying with him. Moments later, Alusha Citrus enters the training hall, and Kiruni gets so flustered that she runs off again, claiming she needs to practice her footwork. Citrus, confused, asks what's gotten into her, and Drought gives a random excuse saying their classmate just needs space to train properly with a huge sword like a Zweihänder. That's when Drought remembers something Alusha said the day before. She'd told him all she wanted was to make her master proud, and then left without another word. Anyway, Alusha apologizes for interrupting the group session, but she needs the hall for a while. She's going to duel the special instructor once he arrives. Drought is caught off guard by the news, so she explains that it's important to strengthen the instructor's image before the royal family visits. Even if he loses, just being able to go toe-to-toe with the commander of the Night Order would speak volumes about his skill. Henblitz asks if that's the only reason she wants to fight him, and she admits if she wins, she plans to tell Beryl about a wish she's been keeping to herself. Once Citrus leaves, Kiruni comes rushing back, hungry for gossip. And when she hears the last part, she's convinced. The commander is dying to confess her feelings to the master. Henblitz adds that the commander is beautiful, smart, and though she's strict, she's also kind. Honestly, it'd be hard for any man to turn down a woman like that. And then, Beryl Gardner shows up, casual as ever, just a laid-back country guy. Alusha wastes no time and challenges him to a duel. Beryl finds it all a bit sudden, but shrugs and agrees without fuss. They take their places in the center of the training hall, surrounded by the other students, with Henblitz Drought acting as the referee. Holding his classic wooden sword, Beryl reflects it's been years since he last sparred with this girl, and now she's commander of the order. If she goes all out, he doesn't stand a chance. Still, it'll make for good practice. As for Alusha, she smiles and warns him she's called Lightning for a reason, and he's about to find out why. Henblitz calls the start, and Lightning lives up to her name. She opens with a move so fast, it's obvious why she earned that nickname. A strike like that would have finished off any other opponent, but she already knew her master would block it. Beryl quickly realizes she's not playing around. He stays on high alert, deflecting blow after blow. After 3 clean blocks, he manages to push her back. She admits no one's ever blocked 3 of her strikes in a row before. Even with her praise, Beryl can't help but worry. She doesn't give the slightest hint of how she'll attack, making her moves as fast as they are unpredictable. He knows he can't just defend forever, one misstep, and it's over. So, after parrying another hit, he pushes forward, hoping to test her defenses. But the plan backfires. Citrus comes at him with such ferocity that he's forced to retreat, and she even manages to graze his leg. Despite the uphill battle, Beryl is determined to win. Losing might only convince Alusha she can still get better. After she knocks him off balance with a quick combo, Alusha steps back and smiles, grateful for the chance to show everything she's learned from her teacher. Watching from the sidelines, Hendlitz mutters that the instructor's already on the ropes, it's just a matter of time. Kiruni, on the other hand, hopes the commander wins, just so she can finally tell the instructor how she feels. Although, deep down, she suspects the master might prefer leaving things just the way they are. Facing such a skilled opponent, Beryl sharpens his focus, determined not to let a single movement slip by. And then it hits him, maybe she's not actually that fast. Maybe it's the way she uses her knee to shift that makes her strikes so unpredictable. Of course, realizing that doesn't exactly make things easier. She moves like she has eyes in the back of her head. Even when she misses, she dodges counterattacks like they were nothing. At this point, Beryl knows there's no way he can win in a fair fight. And just when Alusha spots a weak point near his ribs and moves in for the finishing blow, he grabs her cape and yanks her to the ground, scoring his first point. Kiruni asks, "Wait, is that even allowed?" Drought just shrugs. In a real duel, there are no rules. And honestly, only Gardnet would have the guts to pull that off against the commander of the order. Kiruni totally agrees. Citrus declares the instructor the winner. He praises her swordsmanship, saying she might even be too skilled because not every opponent plays fair, and that's something she must never forget when it comes to real war. Just then, the midday bell rings. Beryl heads off for lunch, while Kiruni and Hendlitz walk over to the commander. Kiruni admits she'd never be able to reach Alusha's level. Then she asks what was it she was going to say to the master if she'd won. Alusha smiles and says she was going to ask for new clothes. Why? Well, she figured it was only fair he bought himself something new, so she thought he should get her something too. He even paid for it himself. Honestly, that makes no sense to me whatsoever. Even so, Kiruni feels awkward for thinking the commander was going to confess her feelings to the sensei, so she ducks out once again, tail between her legs. But despite what was said, Hendlitz isn't buying it. He asks if the commander really has no intention of confessing to Beryl. She replies that, just like she said before, all she wants is to see her master happy, though it'd be even better if she were the reason behind that happiness. Hendlitz chuckles and admits that, at some point, he couldn't even tell who he was rooting for in the duel. The woman confesses she kind of felt the same way. Later that night, during dinner at home, the master tells Mui he was about to get his butt kicked in that earlier fight, so it was a huge relief when he managed to beat Alusha, who, by the way, really showed her strength out there. Mui figures this Alusha girl probably wants the sensei to only have eyes for her. After all, she's the one who invited him out shopping today. And now she's coming in hot with this whole "let's duel" thing just to get all touchy-feely with the guy. No doubt about it, this girl's trying to ride the Glock. Beryl immediately raises a hand and tells his not-quite daughter to cut the wild fantasies. Alusha is his student, and there's a pretty big age gap between them. The kid thinks he's getting hung up on something silly, but he believes the real nonsense would be to stop worrying about it altogether. At dinner the next evening, just as the sun begins to set, Beryl Gardnet takes a long, deliberate swig from his mug, and his face immediately twists into a look of pure bitterness. According to him, the tavern's drink is better because it's always chilled, but it's still worth enjoying something relaxing at home. Mui notices a chip on her father's mug. He casually mentions he dropped it while washing the dishes, but hey, as long as it still holds liquid, it's good enough. Then he asks what the school gave her that day. She pulls out a bag containing a uniform and some borrowed textbooks she'll need to return later. Beryl frowns. "They didn't give you a backpack?" he asks. Her classes start next week, after all. Mui shrugs and replies that no, they didn't, so she's just going to use the sack she has. But that doesn't sit right with Beryl. No daughter of his is going to school without a proper bag. He promises to get her one himself. The next day, Shurna meets with Nidus and Majan. She reads aloud a letter hand delivered by the guildmaster's assistant, which says that a unit made up mostly of platinum ranked adventurers tracked and cornered a monster in a forest near the capital. They're asking for help from a black class adventurer. Right then, someone knocks on the door. Lysandra has a visitor. Meanwhile, Beryl heads out on his mission to find Mui a decent backpack. As he walks into the first shop, he realizes he's never bought one in his life and suddenly feels a bit lost. After a brief chat with the clerk, the man assumes Beryl's here to buy a bag for his son heading to the Magic Institute. He recommends a model from the shelf. Beryl actually likes the style until he hears the price, 95,000 dalks. The clerk explains it's made from Salara Zorok leather top-notch quality, but of course there are cheaper options if that's out of budget. Beryl checks out the lower-end bags but isn't impressed by their quality. He's genuinely tempted to go with the expensive one. By nightfall, he still hasn't made up his mind and walks out of the shop empty-handed. That moment solidifies it for him. He's going to need to stretch his salary as far as possible to afford what Mui needs. It wasn't the bag's style or practicality that held him back, it was the price tag. On his way home, Beryl runs into Lysandra. She tells him she's taken on a complicated task. Taking advantage of the chance encounter, she asks her old master for help. As usual, Beryl tries to back out of the mess. It sounds way too involved, but Shurna insists the pay will be worth it. So, in the very next scene, the two are already in a wagon, heading off toward the mission. Lysandra explains that she was hired by a member of Liberian's royal family to capture a prized horse, a gift for the royal family of Svenedyrvania. Fortunately, the order gave their blessing for Beryl to assist. And, given the circumstances, even the uptight Alucia Citrus didn't object. Beryl gets a little awkward at the mention of Alucia, but he admits the money will help. Lately, that's been a major concern for him. Thinking of that, Shurna recalls someone else who was job hunting the day before, but she doesn't go into detail, leaving Beryl a bit puzzled. They arrive at the site, where a group of adventurers is already gathered. One of them reports that a solid perimeter has been set. They're sure the target is in the forest. Oddly though, all the traps they set an hour ago were still empty. Lysandra instructs her subordinate to guard the perimeter and leave the forest to her. With that decided, she gathers the gear they'll need and calls Beryl to follow her into the woods. As they walk deeper in, Lysandra explains they're searching for a rare horse with snow-white fur and a silver mane. Beryl comments that it does sound like a royal gift. He remembers hunting monsters and wild beasts that destroyed his village's crops, but he's never had to capture anything alive. Shurna agrees that's exactly what makes this job tricky. This horse, for example, managed to escape a group of platinum-class adventurers. That's why she was called in. The men they just saw earlier, all platinum. They managed to herd the creature this far, but catching it is another story. The horse has to be delivered to royalty without a single scratch. Some horse traders even hired adventurers to catch it, but none succeeded. Shurna admits she wasn't too confident at first, but with her master there, she feels 1,000 times better. Eventually, after some searching, the two spot hoofprints in the soft ground near a spring. According to the map, there's another spring nearby, which might be the perfect spot for an ambush. Horses drink a lot of water, after all. On the way to the second spring, Shurna asks what it's been like living with Mui. Beryl says things are starting to settle down, though girls her age can be a handful. Shurna points out he used to deal with girls her age all the time back at the dojo. He explains that living with someone and being a father figure is a whole different challenge. Still, his friend is confident it'll work out. Mui's got her good traits. When they arrive at the spring where they'll set the trap, Lysandra positions them for the ambush. The plan, she'll shoot an arrow from behind the horse. Since horses fear attacks from behind, it should bolt forward. That's when Gardnet will throw the net and capture it. He asks if the arrow won't hurt the poor thing, but she shows him it's just padded cloth on the tip. With the formation in place, the team took their positions and waited patiently for the target to appear. After a while, the white horse finally showed up to quench its thirst, and Beryl was captivated by the animal's stunning beauty. Behind the horse, Shurna lined up a shot and fired, hitting the target right on the rear. The horse bolted straight toward Beryl. Beryl quickly readied his lasso, but the horse leapt in a magnificent arc over the man, almost as if it could fly. Even so, Beryl didn't give up. For reasons unknown, he somehow managed to outrun the horse, get ahead of it, and toss the net, but the animal slipped away at the last second. Determined not to let it escape, the swordsman lunged forward to grab the creature and tried to climb onto its back, but he lost his grip and hit the ground. Frustrated, Shurna hurled the lasso, but the horse dodged it effortlessly and took off again. The pair gave chase, pursuing the animal all the way to a cliffside. Spotting a chance while its speed dropped, Shurna darted ahead and used the reflection of the sun off her blades to blind it temporarily. The plan was to steer it back toward Beryl, but instead, the horse launched itself across the gorge, landing on the opposite side with astonishing ease. Unfortunately, the force of the landing caused a rock slide that practically doomed the animal, given the size and height of the drop. Still, Beryl didn't hesitate. He jumped after it, landing on the same ledge and falling with the beast. In the next scene, it turns out the fall wasn't as disastrous as it seemed. Both the man and the animal were still in one piece. Beryl tried to calm the now panicked creature while figuring out how to get them off the rock. They were stranded on a stone slab surrounded by rushing water. If they tried to cross, the current would surely sweep them away. After thinking it through, the swordsman came up with a plan. With a single swing of his blade, he cleaved a massive tree in half and dropped it across the stream to form a makeshift bridge. The horse looked visibly relieved, and when Beryl slipped on the trunk and nearly fell into the water, the animal grabbed his clothing with its teeth and pulled him to safety. Once they crossed over and reached solid ground, Shurna came sprinting in, completely panicked after circling the entire area looking for her master. To her shock, it looked like Beryl had actually tamed the wild beast. It was calm now, even affectionate, clearly no longer the stubborn creature they'd faced before. When they handed the horse over to the leader of the adventurers, he praised Beryl's ability to pull off a rescue when it really counted. After all, royal requests directly impacted the guild's reputation. Shurna offered a pouch of coins as a reward, and the swordmaster didn't turn it down. As Nidus rode off with the horse, Shurna commented on how productive the day had been thanks to her master. She then admitted she had been a bit jealous of Mui, but promised to root for her from now on. The girl was sincere and genuinely cared about others. Oh, and by the way, Shurna mentioned Beryl might be in for a little surprise when he got home. That quickly reminded him he had to head out. Back at home, Beryl was lucky enough to find the shop still open, and finally bought the high-quality backpack he'd been wanting to give his adopted daughter. For some reason, the girl wasn't there when he arrived, but it wasn't long before she came through the door. Beaming, Beryl showed off the new bag. Even though she usually wore a scowl, Mui broke into a wide, spontaneous smile and slipped the backpack onto her shoulders. As it turned out, she'd also brought something for him, a brand new ceramic mug. Before he could say anything, she made it clear she'd worked hard for it and hadn't stolen it. That instantly brought back what Shurna had said about someone looking for a job the day before, and Beryl realized it had been Mui. She told him herself that she'd gone to Shurna to ask about work and landed a gig washing dishes. When Beryl asked why she'd bought a mug, she reminded him his old wooden one was chipped. So, she asked him to give her gift a try. Without missing a beat, Gardnant took a big swig, and sure enough, the drink tasted even better in ceramic. Smooth, refreshing. Mui had heard that ceramic made drinks taste better, and since her father was always so fond of his beverages, she figured this would make his life a little easier. Then she explained why she got the job. Once she started at the Magic Institute, she wouldn't be able to help out at home anymore, meaning Beryl would have more on his plate. So, she thought, maybe drinking from this mug would help ease the burden, just a little. Hearing that, Beryl couldn't hold it in. He burst into the ugliest cry imaginable. Mui was mortified. She begged him to cut it out and stop being so dramatic. A few days later, it was finally time for Mui's first day at the Institute. Even though she told her father not to come, Beryl insisted on tagging along. She kept a scowl on her face the whole time. When a carriage pulled up headed for the North District, Mui climbed in without even glancing at her tutor. Beryl just waved innocently, pretending not to notice. After that, the swordmaster headed to work. In the middle of an exercise, he was approached by Kiruni, who immediately picked up on the joy radiating from his face and made a comment about it. Beryl agreed it was a big day. But before he could elaborate, Alusha entered the training hall and informed him that the commander and vice commander of the Sacred Order of the Church of Sphene had just arrived at the guild's headquarters. They wanted to meet the local representatives before the rest of their delegation showed up. Alusha was heading there with Henblitz, but Beryl was welcome to join them if he wanted. He paused for a moment, reflecting on the Order of Sphene. He had no idea how they'd dealt with Bishop Revio's situation, so he couldn't rule out the possibility of scheming. Better to investigate and keep an eye on things, so he agreed to go. With that settled, Beryl Gardner stepped into the room, where Henblitz and the two Sphene officers were already waiting. One of them, a former student of his, lit up when she saw him and walked straight over. Beryl recognized Rose Marbleheart and was clearly taken aback by her presence. Meanwhile, Citrus looked visibly annoyed by how comfortably close the girl got to the man. Noticing that the commander of the order isn't exactly thrilled, Rose quickly explains that she was once a student of the famed swordmaster. Beryl, for his part, remembers her well. A few years ago, she spent just a year and a half at the dojo, and let's just say she made quite an impression with her exceptional talent. In fact, Rose thanks the professor for everything he taught her during that time, though the way she shows her gratitude is so intense, so up close, that Alusha looks like she's ready to slap her. Setting that awkwardness aside, everyone finally takes their seats and starts chatting more politely. Beryl still can't quite believe Rose has become the vice commander of the Holy Order. Rose, in turn, thanks the God Sphene for bringing them together again. Her companion beside her adds how surprising it is to learn that Rose and Miss Citrus had the same master. Alusha then asks what happened to Hinos, the former vice commander, and the officer answers awkwardly, saying it's a long story. Sensing something's off, Henblitz asks if Master Gatoga really came just to chat. The man admits that Rose is here to get familiar with Baltrain. They plan to stay for a few days to settle in. Alusha offers a knight to guide them around the city, but Gatoga turns it down. Rose is clearly disappointed. She thought her master would be the one showing her around. Beryl, meanwhile, forces a strained smile, doing his best not to bury his face in the couch out of sheer embarrassment. Later that day, after wrapping up his sword lesson, the renowned Professor Gardner steps out of the training hall, thinking his outfit should be ready by now. On the way, he bumps into the ever-friendly Rose, now without the heavy armor she had on earlier. Wasting no time, she says she came to see her dear master and would absolutely love it if he could show her more of the city himself. With no way to dodge it, Beryl takes her on a little tour around the capital, Baltrain. During their walk, he asks when she joined the Holy Order. She tells him it was right after she left the dojo she was persuaded by Commander Gatoga to use her sword to protect the nation. Honestly, she always imagined herself traveling the world, sipping coconut water in a hammock, but her plans ended up taking a wild turn. Beryl gets it. After all, he himself became an instructor overnight. Speaking of the past, Rose fondly remembers her favorite time in life when he was teaching her how to wield a sword, and she used to pray to Sphene. Beryl notes that becoming a vice commander is a huge promotion, but Rose brushes it off, saying they probably just needed someone to fill the role, like it wasn't that big of a deal. Then, spotting 3 kids playing near a bridge, she says it all happened so unexpectedly. That moment clearly stirs something in her. Trying to change the subject, Rose talks about how much she misses Mr. Mordia and Miss Fren. Still, she makes a point of saying she likes the city, and Beryl agrees. Honestly, she'd love to live there, which leads Beryl to ask what that would mean for her position as an officer. Rose just shrugs, like, who cares? And then, completely shameless, she asks if she could crash at her sensei's place if she ever decides to move to Baltrain. That makes Beryl think there's something about Rose that teenagers just naturally like, and she'd probably get along great with Mui. Still, he says it's not gonna happen. Rose drops the subject for now and says goodbye to her old teacher. After their chat, Gardner heads off to pick up his outfit. Once he changes into it, he instantly regrets it. Not only does he feel ridiculous, but the thing cost him 65,000 dalks. The most he'd ever spent on anything in his life before that was 10,000. Later in the afternoon, he gets home and surprises Mui with his polished, high-class look. But instead of a compliment, she just turns her back with a bored expression. He asks if she didn't like it, and all she says is, "I never said that." Definitely not the reaction he was hoping for, but since Mui isn't exactly the easiest kid to deal with, Beryl's used to it by now. Anyway, she announces that dinner's ready, and he heads to his room to change. When he comes back wearing his usual clothes, Mui mutters under her breath that he looks better like that. Beryl thinks he heard something, but she plays it off. He drops it and takes his first bite of dinner, complimenting how much she's improved in the kitchen. Speaking of improvement, he asks how things are going at school. Miui says her classmates dragged her to the library today. In fact, they drag her somewhere new every day. Yesterday it was the art room, the day before that, music. Honestly, she finds it exhausting. Beryl says they're probably just trying to show her around, but that's exactly the problem for Miui. The school's massive and never seems to end. And today was even worse. The library's filled with magic books, and every single one is as thick as Tally's Gome's head. Beryl listens closely, happy to see her talking so much about school for the first time. She adds that the book they recommended was packed with hard words she didn't understand. That reminds Beryl of how she struggled to sign the school documents, so he offers to help her learn any words she's still unsure about. The next day, standing before her assembled battalion, Commander Alucia Citrus announces that the first Prince of Stephaniadvania will be spending 3 days with them. Today and tomorrow, he'll be touring the capital alongside Her Highness, the third princess. Dressed in his ridiculously expensive uniform, Beryl sighs the big day has finally come. Citrus explains that it's the duty of the Order of Knights to ensure the royal family's safety. The first team assigned to protect the princess will be herself, Henblitz Drought, and Beryl Gardinant. Hours later, the royal family member arrives in Baltrain and is welcomed by the trio assigned to her security detail. Commander Citrus expresses how honored she is to accompany Princess Salacia on her journey, while the young monarch makes a point of saying that Alucia had nothing but great things to say about Instructor Gardinant. Soon after, Prince Glenn arrives with Rose and Gatoga, catching the princess's attention. The two clearly share a deep affection for each other. Glenn even flirts a little, saying he can see every detail of her beautiful face in the bright sunlight. Speaking of flirting, Rose keeps trying, at all costs, to get her former mentor's attention, while he does his best to stay focused on the job. Just then, a carriage pulls up in the courtyard to pick up the two royals. As the prince takes the princess's hand and leads her inside the vehicle, Alucia turns to Beryl and says it's time to set the plan in motion. With that, Beryl gets into a separate car, fully aware that he's nothing more than bait in this story. Outside, walking alongside the moving carriage, Rose asks if the master would like her company. He politely declines, asking her to stick to her assigned position from the beginning. So, the two vehicles continue their route around Baltrain's capital, and as expected, Beryl notices that the entire flow of traffic is being tightly controlled by a large number of soldiers stationed along the streets. Out of nowhere, Glenn and Salacia decide to stop the ride after spotting a hair accessory in a store window that catches their eye. And since they're royalty, no one dares object. Everything halts for their whims. Once Salacia tries on the accessory, Glenn immediately praises her with enthusiasm. Meanwhile, a crowd begins to gather outside the store, and Beryl is stunned by the sheer number of people. According to Henblitz, they've all come to see the royals. When Glenn and Salacia exit the shop, they're treated like idols, with citizens complimenting their looks. Just before Glenn gets into the carriage, Commander Gatoga firmly requests that they not repeat this kind of stunt, and the prince promises he'll try. In the middle of the crowd, Beryl spots a suspicious figure and immediately goes on alert. He scans the area, left and right, but can't find anything resembling what he saw, whatever it was. In the end, he convinces himself it must have been his imagination. Minutes later, with everything back on track, the young nobles are welcomed at the castle with a meal. During lunch, Beryl decides to tell Alucia and Henblitz about the strange movement he noticed near the shop. He actually sensed something like a murderous glare at the time, but since it was so quick, he could be mistaken. Even so, as a precaution, Henblitz heads out to organize the teams and reinforce the guard. After the meal, the royals step out into the palace courtyard to wave at the crowd waiting eagerly for a glimpse of the young crown representatives. Amid all this, 3 individuals in cloaks and masks manage to slip past the guards and sprint straight toward the aristocrats. Gatoga reacts first, drawing his sword, followed by the rest of the elite guard who rush to defend the king and queen of this chessboard. Rose grabs her shield and charges after one of the intruders, while Beryl starts to notice something odd. These attackers don't seem like assassins. But regardless, another 3 invaders suddenly drop down from a rooftop, each holding a smoke bomb. Alucia Citrus immediately orders the prince and princess to be taken inside, as thick smoke begins to flood the palace entrance, making it nearly impossible for the defenders to see. In the haze, the first attacker lunges at Gardinant with a dagger, and he blocks it just in time. Deflecting the second blow, the sensei warns that the enemy's weapons are poisoned. Gatoga kicks one opponent back, but it's not enough to put him down. As the duel drags on, Alucia insists they must find out who's behind this attack, while Henblitz gets hit with a handful of sand thrown into his eyes. Even the master swordsman Beryl is struggling with his opponent. He takes a spinning kick which he manages to block, but the impact is so strong it knocks him off balance. From that moment on, Beryl realizes this is an all-out brawl. If he doesn't go all in, he might not walk away from this. The fight resumes, and in a clever move, the master lands a sharp elbow to his enemy's face. Stunned, the attacker drops his weapon. Vulnerable now, he's struck down with a finishing blow and killed. Henblitz's drought shifts all his focus to his non-visual senses, since the smoke makes sight useless. With his eyes shut, he feels an enemy approaching from the right and lifts his sword just in time to block a stab. The attacker moves with almost inhuman speed, but even in this chaos, Drought stays perfectly centered, not moving a single muscle unnecessarily. Then, at just the right moment, he plants his feet, spins, and channels all that momentum into a precise strike that takes down his target. Now it's Alicia Citrus's turn. She engages in a direct clash with her opponent, but soon realizes these people are playing dirty. Her rival grabs her cape, trying to throw her off balance. She dodges a stab with agile precision and counters with a spinning strike. Though he avoids the first slash, the mysterious attacker doesn't escape a cut to the leg. Wounded, he becomes an easy target for a series of shallow cuts that leave him immobilized. Commander Citrus's plan is to keep this one alive. They need to find out who's behind this whole attack. Relying more on brute strength, Gotoga shoves his opponent against one of the palace columns and rips off his mask. But the moment he sees the man's face, the commander hesitates just long enough to take a kick to the knee, giving his rival the chance to vanish into the crowd. Meanwhile, Rose Marbleheart lands a heavy blow with her shield, knocking the enemy's weapon away and sending him crashing to the ground. With the upper hand firmly in her grasp, the vice commander wastes no time. She finishes the job with a swift strike of her sword, bringing the fight to an end. As the smoke clears, Beryl notices Rose's sword buried in the enemy's forehead and freezes in surprise. He could have sworn she only fought defensively, but it seems she's changed her approach. Henblitz and the other soldiers round up the remaining enemies, but just moments later, the captives bite down on something and start bleeding from the mouth. Within seconds, they're all dead. Check out these videos appearing on your screen and subscribe so you don't miss the next part.